So we have candidates throughout the day. Our last candidate group will start at 8 o'clock tonight, so hopefully you can stay with us. Every hour on the top of the hour is new candidates. So in saying that, I want to introduce our two candidates today for House District 57. First of all, the incumbent, Jason Harper, and his opponent, Billie and Helean. So just as a reminder for everyone in the audience as well as for the candidates, this is not a debate. This is a forum. Everyone out there is listening for your position on key issues and get an idea of who you are. So with that, let's go ahead and get started. So Representative Harper, your opening, please.
Thank you. I'd like to first thank Jerry for putting this on, KDSK for having us on, and all of you who are tuning in. I'm so grateful that we have people who are involved and interested in what goes on in their communities. So thank you for the opportunity to speak to you. So my name is Jason Harper, and for those of you who don't know, House District 57 is northern Rio Rancho. Most of Enchanted Hills, Mariposa, Northern Meadows, North Hills, and a little bit of the Rainbow area, kind of Iris Road North. And it's been a great privilege and honor to represent you in Santa Fe these last 8 years. A little bit about me. I grew up in Rio Rancho, born and raised here. Went to Cibola High School, where I started dating my sweetheart in the high school marching band. We got married, went away for some school, and came back and decided to raise our family here as well. Went to New Mexico Tech for my undergrad, Purdue for my master's, and finished my PhD at UNM, all in chemical engineering. I did take a little break in the middle of my undergrad to go serve a 2-year service mission in the country Hungary. And that was an amazing experience to learn Hungarian. And being in that former Soviet bloc country, I really came to appreciate the freedoms that we have here in America, how precious those are. I work at Sandia National Labs, do research there. I've been working there for 18 years. No, 16 years now. It's hard to keep track. It's gotten large. I make sensors for anthrax to keep our soldiers safe. I've been to Africa to help with the Ebola crisis. And I have 4 children. 2 of them go to school at Cleveland High School, 1 to Ask Academy, and 1 at Vista Grande Elementary School. Love our Rio Rancho Public Schools. So that's a little bit about me.
Thank you, Representative Harper. So, Ms. Helean, opening statement, please.
Thank you. My name is Billie Helean, and I am running for House District 57 to represent the community of Rio Rancho. I consider myself a tireless advocate for working families in our district. I am a first grade teacher. I'm a mom and a wife. My daughter, Michaela, is a sophomore at UNM. She grew up in Rio Rancho, and now she is studying to be a journalist when she graduates from UNM. My husband, Kevin, is a general contractor who builds homes, and so we are a very hardworking family, and we love this community. I will work tirelessly across the aisle to ensure that we're representing this district with fairness and accuracy. I will work really hard to improve our schools, to grow our economy, and to expand access to quality health care, especially for those with pre-existing conditions. I really want to work hard also to keep our neighborhoods safe. I'd like to thank NAIOP, the Rio Rancho Chamber of Commerce, Sandoval Economic Alliance, and this beautiful school for having us here today. I appreciate the opportunity to talk to you about our district and what we want to do to accomplish everything we need to in the future. Thank you again. I'm Billie Helean, and I'm looking forward to a great conversation with some wonderful folks in the room. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Helean. Okay, very first question's coming right back to you. So 2020 has been a very unusual year. If elected, what are priority issues that you plan to champion?
So as I said, I'm an advocate for our community, and we really deserve some great representations for Sandoval County and for District 57. As a first grade teacher, I see every day that the decisions that are made in Santa Fe, how those affect the families in our district. And so because I see that, I really want to work hard, as I said, to strengthen education and make sure that teachers and students have all of the resources they need to be successful. I also want to make sure that we invest in infrastructure in our community, which includes broadband. Broadband access, as we have seen so clearly since March, has been a really big issue for our community. And so I really want to make sure that's something that we work on. It's a critical issue that needs to be fixed, especially in the coming months as we continue with this crisis and lots of online learning. Again, I'm an advocate for our families. I'm here to listen, and I've heard over and over and over again, there are really serious concerns with the broadband access and infrastructure and education in our community. So those all work together, and I'm ready to be the advocate to do what we need to make sure that we have good education and really sufficient access to broadband.
Thank you, Ms. Helean. Representative Harper?
Thank you. So there are so many things great about Rio Rancho in New Mexico, but there are many challenges that we face. And I've been extremely effective legislating on your behalf these last 8 years. As an example, last year, I was able to partner with legislators from every walk of life to have passed and signed into law 8 bills. That's huge. That's a big accomplishment. And I do that by working hand in hand with folks on the other side of the aisle. Every single one of my bills is co-sponsored by someone from the other side of the aisle, and we work together on these initiatives. And for my primary focus this next session, I'm continually concerned about the lack of funding that our Rio Rancho Public Schools gets in relation to other schools. And what folks may not understand is our funding formula is set up in a way that there is a base level of funding, but then there are add-ons. And depending on where you're at, students, per pupil student funding is very different. Rio Rancho schools gets far less per pupil funding than Albuquerque Public Schools or Bernalillo Public Schools. We're usually down at the bottom, even though we're at the top when it comes to performance. And so I've been advocating for this for many years, and I think the time is finally ripe with the Martinez-Yazzie lawsuit and that settlement working through, that we can finally get Rio Rancho the funds it needs. But other areas that I'm really passionate about, we need real tax reform in the state so that we can bring good jobs here, so that our kids, if they choose, they can stay here and have a good job. Another thing that I'm extremely passionate about, the lottery scholarship. I have been fighting 6 years against the Lottery Authority, who tries to raid that fund, put less money into that fund, and other legislators who would like to give more money to some students and less to others. And again, I partner with my friends on the other side of the aisle to do just that. So much more to talk about.
Thank you, Representative Harper. Okay, next question's coming right back to you. So, what ideas do you have to address the large budget deficit that New Mexico is going to experience next year and in future years?
It's a great question, and I want folks to just take a step back and just imagine. You know, which New Mexico would you rather be in? A New Mexico that right now is flush with reserves, has a responsible budget, and instead of talking about slashing, we're talking about what to invest in. Versus a New Mexico that has spent all of their extra cash, is way overspent on the budget, and now we're having to talk about $1 billion shortfall. I mean, which one would you prefer to be in? And I don't think the question is hard. And you look, and it's not rocket science. You go back and you look over the last 30 years, what's the safe number to raise our state budget by every year? And it's 3%. So if we raised our budget by 3% every year, you would never have to talk about furloughing state employees, about sweeping money from our elementary and middle schools, which has happened over the last several years because of irresponsible spending. And so you can imagine how upset I was when over the last 2 years we've increased our state budget by 20%. 20% over 2 years. That's ridiculous. That's out of control. And so I warned on the House floor that we would have this day come. We would have a reckoning when the oil and gas industry, which was fueling those incredible reserves and surpluses, that day would come to an end, and we would have to be asking all these hard questions again. And I did not expect, when I said that on the House floor, that 3 months later we'd be coming back and having to address a COVID crisis and a falling out of the oil and gas industry. So we really have a spending problem in New Mexico. And that led to the greatest tax increase in New Mexico state history that was passed to make up for this reckless spending. And I again warned about that on the House floor. I said, this spending will lead to a tax increase because of a self-imposed crisis.
So, Representative Harper, what's your thought on raising taxes?
So, I have not signed a no new tax pledge because I believe, as an academic who has spent thousands of hours studying our tax code, that what we need to do is a complete rebalancing. I don't believe that we should be paying more in taxes, but I believe that some taxes should be raised and some should be lowered. And in that way, we stop looking like this weird sore thumb that we are. And the biggest problem is gross receipts taxes in our state. We are one of only 2 states with a gross receipts tax, and it is a complete job killer, a complete small business killer. So I have been championing for the last 6 years, really, reforming our gross receipts tax. And most people don't even know we have a gross receipts tax. We don't really have a sales tax in New Mexico. When you go to Walmart and you buy something, sales tax, that's what it says on the receipt, but it's not really sales tax. It's gross receipts tax. And us normal consumers don't really see much of that. And what happens is your small businesses, they get killed with this gross receipts tax. And it also scares businesses away that might be considering coming to New Mexico. They hear gross receipts tax and they go, okay, we're not even going to consider coming to New Mexico. So reforming that gross receipts tax, removing all these corporate loopholes that are in there. There's more than 100 exemptions, deductions, and credits, corporate welfare. And I've been, as a Republican, the loudest critic of these and trying to remove them, and then use that revenue that comes in to lower the tax rate for everybody, so all New Mexico families and small businesses can benefit. And I've had lots of partners all the way across the aisle, but do we have the courage to do it? And that's the problem. We were so close a couple years ago. The bill passed the House unanimously. Every Republican, every Democrat voted for it. But it got to the Senate, and the lobbyists descended. And sadly, it was killed because the lobbyists were going to lose their particular loophole.
Okay. Thank you, Representative Harper. So, Ms. Helean, the same question is, what ideas do you have to address the large budget deficit anticipated by the state of New Mexico?
So the actual deficit isn't really clear yet because of COVID and the things that we're going through right now. And so when I look at that deficit, I think about not where we can change things that are happening already with taxes. I think about our economy as a whole. And I think about how we must diversify our economy. We rely very heavily on an industry that has wild swings. And if we diversify our economy by safely legalizing cannabis, that money can stay here in New Mexico instead of going across the border to Colorado to the tune of $100 million. We can also move into more alternative energies and develop those energies that we can sell to neighboring states, again, increasing our revenue. Oil and gas is a great partner, and I want to continue that partnership for our state, but I do think that we need to continue that partnership along with these other things. The legislature may consider cutting the budget, but I really want to make this very clear. I don't want it to happen on the backs of working New Mexican families. That is not okay, and we need to make sure that we're supporting families in every way we can so that they can have the successful future that they are looking for. I definitely oppose raising taxes on families in the state of New Mexico. We need to, again, support families with resources so that they can have the successful future they have envisioned for themselves and for their children.
Thank you, Ms. Helean. So in the same conversation, same question, follow-up to that is how do you feel about raising taxes?
I don't think it's a wise decision to raise taxes on families. I really believe that families are bearing the brunt of this economic crisis that we have right now with lost jobs and increased needs for their families. And so I really disagree with raising taxes on families.
Okay, thank you. Next question we have, again, is taxes again. So in relation to that, Ms. Helean, this question's coming right back to you. Do you believe that there is a need for comprehensive tax reform? And if so, how do we make the tax fair and consistent and equitable to New Mexicans?
So I am open to tax reform, again, as long as it's not on the backs of working New Mexicans. I think that's a really critical issue. And this question actually underscores even more highly the need to find alternative revenue sources. And that would allow us to reform taxes responsibly. I've actually supported in the past Working Families Tax Credit. I also think that during this economic downturn, I really can't support tax breaks for big corporations and other places, because then where will the money come from? How will we help hardworking New Mexican families? Those are the questions that come up to me when we think about tax reform. I do agree with my opponent when he says that we need to eliminate corporate tax loopholes. Absolutely, we do. We need to focus on small businesses. They make up a big chunk of New Mexico's economy, and I really want to see us support small businesses. We need to invest in them and support them and make sure that they have all the resources they need to succeed as well.
Thank you. Representative Harper, same question.
Thank you. So I think the best example I can give to help people understand why we need tax reform and what the problem is there was a study that was done by Ernst & Young in 2007. And it took 10 kind of virtual businesses and plopped them into each state and ran their tax code against those businesses, and they rated them, how they turned out. And would you like to guess where New Mexico fell in the ranking? No, not 50th. We were 51st because the study included the District of Columbia. Now, our Legislative Finance Committee and our tax experts here looked at the results and said, no, this isn't right. They did the math wrong. And so the state actually paid Ernst & Young to redo the study with our help. And they found that instead of being twice as bad as our nearest neighbors, we were now kind of middle of the pack. And so to me, that screams two things. The first is our tax code is so bad, even the experts at Ernst & Young couldn't get it right the first time. The second is, unless you can qualify for one of these tax exemptions, deductions, credits, how on earth can you compete? So we need complete broad-based tax reform. The sore thumb in our tax code is the gross receipts tax. Our property tax is generally about average with other states. And where my guiding principles are is, in a state of New Mexico's size, you really don't want to be an outlier on either end of the tax code. You don't want to be super low, and you don't want to be super high. You want to be in the middle of the pack. And so if we could bring our gross receipts tax down, our income tax is starting to inch up, we need to bring that back down. Our property tax is an outlier on the low end. If we could comprehensively wrap all these things around in a way that does not increase taxes on New Mexico families, and I've done the math, actually they would benefit from this, that could be a godsend for New Mexico and be a spur for economic development and jobs.
Okay, thank you, Representative Harper. Okay, so let's get off the taxes. What do you think? So moving on, so let's talk about regulations. So New Mexico is seen as a much more regulated state than other areas of the country. And when we look at our neighboring state, Arizona, which became a state at about the same time, we have almost twice as many laws in place that regulate businesses in the state of New Mexico. So what are your thoughts on what we could do to, what the legislature could do to make New Mexico look more attractive to not only outside investment, but also to help our businesses already here?
Yeah, that's me. Okay.
Representative Harper, you got the first one on this one.
Awesome. That's a great question. And there's a lot that goes into a business's decision where they set up and locate. And one of the big revelations I got when I started here understanding this in the legislature was the incredible competition between states for businesses. I didn't realize how intense that is. And so it really makes a difference how you look, especially compared to your neighbors. And right now, our tax code is a disaster. We've got great weather. Our education system, depending on where you're at, is good, but in other places it's not. And then again, crime, depending on where you're at, is good or bad. So when a business is considering where to go, these are the things they really look at. And so I think to help spur the economy, we need to address education, we need to address crime, we need to address our taxes. And then the other question that you asked about regulation. It would take more than 58 seconds to go into all of it, but you are exactly right. We are very heavily regulated. And most of these regulations have good intentions, but they end up making the cost of business so incredibly high that New Mexico can't compete with neighboring state businesses. And just one example I'll give. There's this piece of paper called an NTTC that businesses have to show if they're purchasing or selling something that's not taxable, part of our tax code. And if they are audited and they don't have this piece of paper, then they get slammed with that tax and they have to pay it. And these kind of got you audits that were done by our tax department almost killed, I can name, I won't here, but almost killed good businesses here in Rio Rancho. And so I carried a bill, bipartisan legislation to change that. So if a business doesn't have that piece of paper, but they can prove with alternative evidence that the transaction was not taxable, then they're not subject to the tax. And that has really helped New Mexico small businesses.
Thank you, Representative Harper. Ms. Helean, same question.
Thank you. So one of the things that I've heard a lot when I talk to voters in District 57 is that infrastructure is something that's severely lacking in House District 57. And that's something I think we need to start. We can begin by investing in infrastructure, including broadband, to help attract businesses to the state. We also need to diversify the subsidies that we offer to businesses to come to New Mexico, and that would help us bring new supply chains to New Mexico. Small businesses, like I said before, they're a very sizable portion of our economic growth in this state. And so, again, I think we need to support small businesses first. We bought our house in Northern Meadows in 2005. When we bought our house, we were told that that would be a thriving economic area in Rio Rancho. And then, unfortunately, we had the economic downturn of 2008, and construction came to a screeching halt. And since then, we've been waiting. We've been waiting for businesses that would be attracted to that area of town to come and set up shop. But when you look at the infrastructure needs of that area, I wouldn't want to open a business there. And so my hope is that by investing in infrastructure, making sure that we have good roads, good technological access for companies and for individuals, hopefully that will help make us a more attractive area to businesses who want to move here.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Helean. So we're going to, next question's coming right back to you. So tell us, first of all, where you purchased your campaign signs, but then also a couple ideas on how the state of New Mexico can increase awarding contracts to New Mexico businesses. That is, there's a lot of state contracts that are being awarded out-of-state companies instead of in-state companies. So what are your thoughts on that, and where did you purchase your signs?
I'm happy to answer that question, actually. I purchased my yard signs that you'll see on corners at Rio Rancho at Don Mickey Designs, a local union print shop here in Albuquerque. I'm really proud to support local businesses like Don Mickey Designs, especially small businesses that are ready to grow and support the community. One immediate idea I have to help bring more contracts and keep them in state and in District 57 is making the capital outlay process very transparent. It's something I'm very passionate about. I want to make sure that we keep money that is allocated for capital outlay in district. I don't want to see money go to other counties, other states, anywhere else, but right here in House District 57. I want to make sure that we're supporting small businesses here and awarding contracts to contractors who live in our state and even in House District 57 to make sure that we're supporting families right here in New Mexico. I also really want to support making sure that any projects that we do are awarded to folks who are using that money responsibly. And again, transparency is key. If we stay transparent, make the entire process easily accessible by people who live in the state of New Mexico, and that way we can make sure that folks are doing what they're supposed to do and that money is used the way it's supposed to be used.
Thank you, Ms. Helean.
Thank you.
Representative Harper, same question.
Thank you. So I'd like to just first say that I completely agree with my opponent regarding capital outlay. In fact, for the last 7 years, we have a public forum, and I'd like to invite everyone listening to our public forum that we have. It's usually around Christmas time or but after New Year's Eve. We invite the news, we invite all those who are requesting capital outlay, we invite the public to come and hear what the options are. We discuss, we debate. And then also, after we've made those assignments of capital outlay, we make them public. And you can go and look, you can see everything that I've invested in. I completely agree that there should be transparency there, and I love investing in Rio Rancho infrastructure. My campaign signs, great question. So the majority of my donors are hardworking families. I call my friends, family, neighbors, and they sacrifice to contribute to my campaign. Sadly, it's expensive to run a campaign. And so when I see that sacrifice come in, I'm very careful with those dollars. And when I first ran, I did a survey of different sign shops throughout the state, And sadly, the best price I found was a group in Texas. And so I've been working with that group, and they give me a good deal. My bulk mail, though, did a survey, and the best rate I got was from a group here in Albuquerque. And so I work with them for my bulk mail, and that's where most of the money goes. A mailer usually costs between $3,000 to $4,000 to send out. Super expensive. But I think that's a good example of maybe a different way to look at that question, right? We can try to put our thumb on the scale so that more New Mexico businesses get contracts, but really shouldn't we be talking about enabling and helping our small businesses so that they can compete? Our gross receipts tax, the business pyramiding makes it so they can't compete, the tax pyramiding there. So if we can do things that make them more competitive, they'll be winning contracts all over the place.
Okay, thank you, Representative Harper. Okay, so the next question that we have coming up is on education. So New Mexico's education is funded at a higher level per student than Arizona, Texas, Utah, and Colorado. But yet we're still ranked 49th. And those other states are ranked much better than we are in education. So what is it that the legislature could do to improve education in this state?
That's the golden question right there. And I'll say that there are some things that we don't have much control over, right? So I went to school at Puesta del Sol, Lincoln Middle School, and Cibola High School. And I'll tell you, being a nerd was not cool. There are some cultural things where it's not looked upon favorably to succeed. Also family. I was just talking to my neighbor who's a teacher in Bernalillo Public Schools, and he said that half of his students don't sign in to his class, and so they're all failing. So they don't have the parental support. We know that families make a huge difference in a kid's education. So there are some things that we can perhaps try to help the culture move in those directions in the legislature. And I think those would make big differences. But the other side of the coin is the money. And when you look at the funding level per student that New Mexico does, we're about middle of the pack with the other states. And a lot of them perform better than we do, and some perform worse, but we're about middle of the pack. So to me that says there are things that we could do differently with that money that would give us a better outcome, because we're at the bottom of the outcomes, but middle of the pack on spending. And so just one example, when you look at how the funding formula is set up, it starts with like a base amount per student. And then if that student has special needs, more is added. If their English is a second language, that's added. Free and reduced lunch, you have additives put on that. And that makes sense. These students need extra help, right? I'm totally for that. But then where's the incentive to a school district to succeed and excel, right? And so we actually talked about, and I carried a pilot project that would allow schools who showed at-risk students moving the needle, improvement with those at-risk students, that they would receive extra funds. And I bet you that would totally work in this state.
Thank you, Representative Harper. Ms. Helean, same question.
Thank you. Well, as I mentioned, I'm a first grade teacher, and so I see what this looks like in the classroom every day. And my students need more than just reading, writing, and math. They actually need food. They need materials. They need a lot of things that have a deep effect on whether or not a student can succeed. It's not just about what happens in the classroom. It's about what happens at home. And when a student comes in and has concerns and worries that outstrip their ability to concentrate in class, that has significant impact on how they perform in school. And so knowing that we can do something about that makes me feel really excited, actually, because we can succeed by investing in early childhood education and making sure that kids get a great start in their educational journey. We can make sure that our families have adequate resources for their entire family, making sure that every student has enough food to eat and has enough materials to make sure that they can succeed in the classroom. We also need to make sure that we're investing in our teachers to make sure that we keep them here in New Mexico. We've lost a lot of really good teachers to neighboring states. I want to invest in our teachers so that we can keep them here. New Mexico really wasn't at the bottom until the whole testing phenomenon brought on by Hannah Scandera and Susana Martinez. Testing like that is akin to COVID testing and saying that COVID testing is going to cure the disease. And so we want to make sure that we focus on students and families and supporting everything that they need so that students can succeed regardless of what's happening out there in the world.
Okay, Ms. Helean, thank you. So let's go ahead and just stay with education. So let's talk briefly about career technical education.
Yeah.
So career technical education is an important piece in New Mexico, brings a lot of jobs, but it has been far underfunded in this state for a number of years. So what is it the legislature could do to not only expand career technical education, but also help connect businesses with our youth?
You know, this is a really great question. I remember when I was in high school, I graduated in 1988, and when I graduated in high school, wood shop and auto shop were still a thing. And I would actually really like to see that happen again. We have a lot of students who aren't built for college. We always encourage kids, go to college, but that's not their passion. Their passion is working on cars or working with wood. I live with someone like that. My husband, Kevin, is not built for college. He loves to work with his hands, and he's extremely talented at home building, and he makes a great living doing it. And I would love to connect students with more opportunities for those classes in high school and beyond. In addition to that, those students who want to go to college, like my daughter, Michaela, she's a sophomore at UNM studying journalism, and she is really excited about the opportunity to do an internship so that she can learn more about the industry that she's chosen for her future. No matter what we do, we need to make sure that we're connecting students to opportunities to experience the things that they're passionate about. It's an important thing in a person's soul and in their heart to make sure that they're doing something they believe in. And so I want to make sure that we're offering students every opportunity to do that, from kindergarten all the way through college.
Thank you, Ms. Helean.
Thank you.
Representative Harper.
Yeah, thank you. Great question. And really this ties back to the problem with our funding formula. So yeah, I remember wood shop and auto shop in high school, and those were really removed because they are such expensive programs to run. And also at the college level, those programs are extremely expensive to run, and you also don't see them very commonly at the college level either. And we've designed our funding formula in the state to really discourage those kinds of those programs. And so this is something that I think everyone agrees. This isn't a Republican or Democrat issue. We all agree that this would be a good thing to change. The issue is making sure that we can find that funding while also making sure that we can give teachers raises and that we can fund the food for students. So it's one of these things that is a struggle, but we really would like to make changes in that area because there's so many jobs in that area right now. There's actually a shortage of jobs in that area. When it comes to how can we connect students with businesses, that's a great question. So when I went to school at New Mexico Tech, every year my wife and I would go out during the summers for internships. And those were amazing because they helped us to understand the relevance of what was being taught. They gave us job experience. They kind of were job interviews, if you can think of them that way. And so I've actually been working with our tax department secretary to say, could we not do something like this with our local universities? They need lots of help at the tax department. Can we not have some internship program with UNM and New Mexico State to bring them in, and then you kind of have a pipeline? So I think stuff like that, these kind of innovative ideas to engage students early on, they get a paycheck, they see what public service is, like, I think that could really make a big difference in New Mexico.
Thank you, Representative Harper. Okay, so shifting gears, let's talk infrastructure. So as we know here, specifically in Rio Rancho, we're always talking about roads. So in New Mexico, it's our roads, our bridges, our highways are rapidly aging very quickly. We have some bridges that if you talk to county commissioners, some of them are up to 100 years old. So what is it that you could do to perhaps get a potential infrastructure bill in place? And a second part of that question has to do with infrastructure is, what's your stance on Paseo del Volcan?
Yeah, great question. We all drive through Rancho roads, and it's funny when I'm on the phone. My wife can tell when I've gotten to Rio Rancho because you hear this thud every few seconds as you cross another crack in the road. And I know that our mayor and city council have been working hard to address those issues. At the state level, there's not too much we do with the state roads, or I'm sorry, the city roads. The state roads that we take care of are mainly your highways. The counties also have responsibility for their roads. But really the distribution of funds there is the big problem. Most of our money for roads comes from gasoline tax and from car registrations. And a lot of that money, I think a larger proportion than should, goes to state roads. And we need to reallocate those so that more goes to counties and more goes to cities. That's one thing that we can really do to help. Another thing, just being intellectually honest and consistent, is our gasoline tax is about 5-6 cents lower than that of our neighbors. And I think that if we raised that tax by 5 or 6 cents and made sure it went to roads, that would be something I could support. And then when it comes to Paseo de Volcan, I've been a champion of that ever since I heard about it. Huge, right? One of the ways that you can raise revenue is by raising taxes. But another way to raise revenue is to increase the size of your economic pie. And Paseo de Volcan can do that for Rio Rancho, being another thoroughfare into this city, going right by Northern Meadows. They might actually get some good businesses over in that area. Would just be huge, because right now we're limited to really 550 and 528. It's hard for a big business to come in here. And that road will intersect with W Airport. And there's examples of this in Arizona where they put a loop road in place and the economy just skyrocketed around it. So I really think that's a way to move forward.
Thank you, Representative Harper. Ms. Helean, same question, please.
Thank you. Okay. So investments in projects like this bring immediate long-term jobs to our community, so it's exciting to think about that. And like my opponent, I actually believe that this project would actually make Rio Rancho an economic hub in the state. So it's something I support. I would love to see Paseo de Volcan expanded. But when we do that, I want to make sure that, again, transparency is key. I want to make sure that when we hire contractors to do this project, that we're hiring folks in-state and that we're making the project very transparent so that the folks who have the biggest investment in that project, the people who live in New Mexico, have a say in how it goes. We really need to make sure that we're listening to our community stakeholders, community leaders, families, and all of our community members. They are the stakeholders. And far too often I have heard that Santa Fe leaves those voices out and they don't listen. And I really want to make sure that we are heard. I want to make sure that you are heard so that when these kind of projects come up, your voice is included in that decision. And I think that we can make that change now.
Thank you, Ms. Helean. Okay, so all done with the questions. Time for closing statements. So Ms. Helean, you're first.
Thank you. I am Billie Helean, and I'm running again because I want to be the advocate that families deserve in House District 57. I want to make sure that folks have someone who's going to listen to them. I have served as a teacher in our community for several years, and I have firsthand knowledge of how those decisions in Santa Fe affect the families that live right here in our community. And because of that, I have found that I want to make sure that we amplify the voices of the folks who live here. And I want to make sure that we're using those voices to help improve our schools, to grow our economy, to expand access to quality health care, especially for people with pre-existing conditions. And I want to make sure that we're keeping our neighborhoods safe. So I am an advocate, and I will work tirelessly across the aisle to make sure that we're addressing all of those needs. I'm really excited for the opportunity to be here today, and I want to thank you again to NAIOP, the Rio Rancho Chamber, to the Sandoval Economic Alliance, and to Mr. Harper. I am Billie Helean, and I'm running to be the advocate you deserve in House District 57.
Thank you, Ms. Helean. Representative Harper, closing statements.
Thank you. I've enjoyed this evening and the pleasant collegial discussion that we've had, maybe in contrast to some other things that have happened recently. But I just want to say what a rich privilege it has been to advocate for you these last 8 years in Santa Fe. Every bill I've carried has been the request of one of the constituents in this district. I consider you my friends, my family, and I love this job. The best part of this job is when I get a call from someone asking for help. I love that. The fundraising, the stuff in Santa Fe, you know, I could leave that behind, but I love helping my friends, neighbors, and my constituents. I believe that Rio Rancho is not Albuquerque, and we like it that way. I believe that catch and release is for fish, not criminals. I believe that we should teach kids how to think, not what to think. I believe that children should be seen and not hurt. I believe that it's time we stop exporting our kids, that they should be able to find a good job here in New Mexico. I believe that wage earners should keep more of their hard-earned wages. And I believe that we can do better, that we must do better, and that the sun is not setting on New Mexico, but the sun is rising on New Mexico. And I humbly ask for your vote so that I can continue to advocate for you and your family. Thank you.
Our candidates today are for Senate District 10, Senator Candace Gould, and Miss Duhigg, her opponent. So with that, I want to remind our candidates and those watching and listening of a couple things. This is a forum and not a debate. So our focus is to have everyone have the ability to listen to what the candidates are about, what their positions are, and why they're running for office. So with that, let's go ahead and get started. So let's open with Senator Gould with your opening statement.
Hi, thank you very much for having me here today. I've had the honor of representing Senate District 10 for the last 4 years. That's our southwest corner of Rio Rancho, and I really enjoy the people that I've met up there and being able to work with them over these 4 years. It also encompasses Albuquerque and Los Ranchos, so it's a big, diverse district. I came here in 1972 when my father took his last tour of duty, and actually chose to stay as an adult. I love New Mexico, and my family did too. All of the 5 girls, 2 of them did leave, but 3 stayed. My parents are 92 years old, both of them, and they're still here. And it's been a great place to be as an adult. I chose to stay as an adult because I do love New Mexico. 14 years ago, I started working with foster kids because I have seen over the years our struggles with our poverty and our poor educational outcomes, and those kids are the result of these issues that we have in New Mexico. Working with the aged out youth, I found firsthand just exactly what those results do to our families and to our kids. And so that's why when they asked in 2016 if I would run for this seat, that I said yes. And I did that to break that cycle of poverty, to help every child succeed and every family be healthy. And that's really breaking that cycle of our poverty and poor educational outcomes was why I chose to run. So thank you very much for having me.
Thank you, Senator Gould. Ms. Katy Duhigg, opening statement.
Thank you. And before I start, I just want to thank the sponsors of this forum. In this day and age of COVID, it is challenging connecting with voters. So this is a great way to reach the voters of District 10 as they're making their decision about this race. But my name is Katy Duhigg, and I'm running for State Senate here in District 10 because I believe in good government. And I know that when government is good, we all prosper. I was born and raised in District 10. My father was a small business owner here for over 60 years, and I was lucky to have him as my business partner for 10 of those. I have 9 brothers and sisters, most of whom have stayed here in New Mexico, and I'm proud to be raising my son, Jack, right around the corner from the house that I grew up in. I believe in and have spent my career fighting for transparency and accountability. I'm a small business owner, an attorney, and I used to be the city clerk in the largest city in New Mexico. The majority of my work has been nonpartisan, from organizing New Mexico's first statewide nonpartisan election protection program in 2008 to overseeing the 2019 nonpartisan local election in the city of Albuquerque in 2019. I said that already. But my commitment to prioritizing policy over politics is front and center in everything I do. I've spent much of my career working on issues of governmental ethics, from helping to draft the legislation of the State Ethics Commission in 2019, to rewriting the Code of Ethics in the city of Albuquerque, to serving on the Bernalillo County Board of Ethics. And my family instilled in me the belief that public service is the highest calling, and that what New Mexicans and New Mexican small businesses really need and want from their government is a partner. If elected, I will be the partner that New Mexicans need in the Roundhouse, and together we'll make sure that New Mexico thrives.
Thank you, Ms. Duhigg. Okay, right back to you. Very first question to start us off. 2020 has been a very unusual year. If elected, what is the priority issue that you plan to champion?
I'm sorry.
Yes, you're first.
Yes, okay, sorry. So given the impact that COVID has had on New Mexico, we have to make sure that New Mexicans are healthy, both physically and economically. And as I said in my opening, I come with a good government approach, and that's the lens that I'll bring to all of the issues that are facing our state. One major priority is going to be economic stabilization and development, with a specific focus on building in accountability so that we know that New Mexicans' tax dollars are being well spent. That means ensuring that small businesses are able to stay open, both by keeping New Mexicans healthy and also by ensuring that our state government, or that our state is supportive of and creating a pathway to jobs and small businesses. But there's going to be a lot of proposals flying around in the next legislative session where saying that the state should help this group or that group, and that these people need an exemption, and these folks need special funding, et cetera, et cetera. My priority is going to be to make sure that our state is being fair and that we're building accountability into our economic recovery so that we know that when someone gets an exemption or gets some special funding or does anything else to meet the unique needs that we're seeing during this crisis, we know that it's actually being used for the purpose that it's intended.
Thank you, Ms. Duhigg. Senator Gould,
Okay, now,
same question.
Thank you. So life after 2020 is going to be different. We're going to have long-term economic consequences to this year. I think there's going to be major shifts as we come out of COVID, as people move to find jobs. We need to be prepared for that, or we will be left behind. Rio Rancho is in a perfect position for that. Its work over the last several years on infrastructure and attracting business makes it very solid, in a solid position for that moving economy. People we have in New Mexico are struggling. They're using their life savings. Their income is based on the whims of DC politics with their unemployment. They're struggling. We need to be able to get our families back to work as quickly as we can. We need to also balance those needs of those working families with the needs the businesses have to expand and hire more people. We cannot double down on the old policies that we've had in New Mexico. We need to focus on being part of the solution, a forward-looking agenda. My priority is to continue the work that I've been doing. I've passed bills on infrastructure and roads, correcting flooding issues in Rio Rancho and in Albuquerque, expanding broadband, helping military spouses get their professional licensures quickly so they can get up and get to work. That work in the legislature has earned me an A rating with the Business Coalition and 3 awards from the Chamber of Commerce, Albuquerque Chamber of Commerce. It also gave me the Senate Milagro Award that's only awarded to 2 senators each session, and it's rarely awarded to a rookie, so I'm very proud of that one. The recovery is going to encompass 3 areas, really. First, we need to support...
Ms. Gould, you're out of time.
That was a long one, thank you.
We'll move on to the next question, but you do get the next question.
Okay.
So what ideas do you have to address the large budget deficit that's anticipated in the state of New Mexico over the next year and the following years? And then second to that is, would you vote to raise taxes on New Mexicans?
Okay. So we need to rethink the structure of our government and its role it plays in our communities. We need to really evaluate our agencies and look for ways for them to streamline while still providing quality services to our communities. In 2017, the legislature wisely put together a fund to manage the boom and bust cycles of our oil and gas industry. We're fortunate that we still have a lot of that funding left from our recent boom. Those reserves need to be stretched out over the next few years. There's a projected uptick right now in our revenue because of oil and gas and the reopening of businesses, but that projection also is saying that it's going to take years to recover. We need to balance investing on our infrastructure, make sure we still have that room in our budget to be prepared for our post-COVID economic recovery, but we also need to make sure that we're serving our most vulnerable with our government as well. As far as the tax, I have signed the no tax pledge for the 2021 session. Everyone is making adjustments to deal with the COVID issue, and our government needs to as well. We can't put more taxes on our already struggling families and businesses.
Thank you, Ms. Gould. Senator, Ms. Duhigg, same question.
Thank you. So, and I'll address the second question first. I don't believe that raising taxes at a time when people already can't pay their bills is sound fiscal policy. But when it comes down to it, we're going to have to deal with our budget deficit the same way that a lot of New Mexico families are dealing with budget deficits in their own homes, which is by tightening our belts, making cuts, and prioritizing our spending. And there's no question that there are some concrete steps that we can take, like reforming our tax code that I know we're going to talk about in the next question, pressing pause on non-essential projects, and using our tax dollars more efficiently. But as bad as things are right now, and probably will be for at least the next fiscal year, this is an excellent opportunity to look at what we do as government, why we do it, and find out if we're being effective, so that when we're making cuts to balance our budget, we're doing it in a way that makes sense. We have a real opportunity here to be strategic, so that any cuts that are made are tied to necessity and effectiveness. And that's something that's going to serve New Mexico well, not only during this budget crisis, but going forward.
Thank you, Ms. Duhigg. So next question coming up here. New Mexico is seen as a very regulated state as compared to surrounding states. So that said, in comparison, Arizona has half as many regulations as New Mexico, and they both became states about the same time. What would you do as a legislator to make New Mexico look more attractive to outside investment as well as supporting our local businesses?
So I'm a consumer protection attorney, and I was the city clerk in Albuquerque, and so I've thought about regulations a lot in both those roles. And when we talk about regulations, there's really two key things that we need to look at. The first is, why are we regulating? And the second is the regulation producing the results that we're aiming for? We should never be regulating just for the sake of it, and we shouldn't use regulation as a way to keep people from being able to compete. What's more, a regulation that doesn't provide the outcome that we're aiming for not only doesn't help New Mexico, it can affirmatively do harm. So we need to have a process in place to review our regulations for both use and usefulness so that we can make data-driven decisions and make sure that we're appropriately protecting New Mexicans. But apart from regulations, there are a number of steps that we can take to make New Mexico more business-friendly. We can reform our gross receipts tax code. We can create a one-stop shop for business licensing that encourages entrepreneurship. We can have licensing costs that are on par with our surrounding states, especially in growing industries. We can have more reciprocity so that people who are coming to New Mexico ready to work can actually do so. We can invest in our workforce by closing the digital divide and making sure that our kids have the internet access they need so that they'll be ready to fill jobs in the future. And we can invest in our infrastructure so that we attract more companies like Amazon, which is now building a 450,000 square foot warehouse on Albuquerque's west side. But I do think that it's important that we be an inviting state for businesses without paying people to come here. Because every time we do that, We put hardworking New Mexicans who have built their businesses here without getting any special favors from government at a disadvantage compared to out-of-state companies. And that's not right, and it does not respect New Mexico.
Thank you, Ms. Duhigg. Senator Gould, same question.
I've worked in small business in Albuquerque for 40 years. I understand that business needs to be flexible to account for changing markets. Mandates and over-regulation hinder their ability to expand and create new jobs. Business has to make adjustments with every mandate we do. Unintended consequences to those mandates sometimes are lost jobs. State regulations are a one-size-fits-all, and what works in metro areas doesn't always work in our small towns. So I believe that those regulations need to be done on a individual basis. Local control is a key. New Mexico can create family-sustaining, high-paying jobs if we restructure our policies. My vision is to have a deep bench of jobs for workers instead of regulations to create opportunity. If they want to change jobs that they're unhappy with, there's more jobs down the pike they can go to. They can also have an opportunity to move up in their careers. At the beginning of COVID, we immediately lost 2 manufacturers that consolidated their locations out of New Mexico. I suspect it was our regulations, tax structure, and business environments that caused that move. Consistency, common sense regulation, and government not micromanaging through law is key.
Thank you, Senator Gould. So the other thing that we hear from small business owners as well as our community is around taxes and the understanding of GRT versus sales tax. There's a lot of confusion around that. In saying that, do you believe that there is a need for comprehensive tax reform? And if so, how would you make it more fair and consistent than it might be today? Ms. Gould, you have the first.
Thank you. So absolutely, we need tax reform. Our tax code is from the 1960s. Over the years, there's been carve-outs to make it work, described as Swiss cheese. Our tax code hinders attracting and keeping business. The pyramiding is a problem. There has been intensive work done by the legislature. Representative Harper led this charge when I first got into the legislature. It was very good work. It did not get through. However, we did agree to fund a comprehensive study on that tax code reform. That study and that bill need to be revisited. It has been put under the carpets. It needs to be revisited, and the legislature needs to come together and enact the policies from that study and work on that existing bill to make it work for New Mexico and for all of our businesses and citizens. The reform should include our most vulnerable, like removing state tax from our Social Security. I sponsored that bill last session, and I will continue to sponsor that until it passes. It also must include broadening our base to make the burden of taxes fairer. The community as a whole will have to work together to make this happen. There will be sacrifices and just burdens on getting this tax code through. It is going to take political will to make this happen.
Thank you, Senator Gould. Ms. Duhigg, same question around taxes.
Thank you, and I suspect that Senator Gould and I actually agree on a lot of the issues around taxes. You know, I've owned a small business. I understand what it's like to have to make payroll. I understand the pressures that are on the boss if you don't have sufficient revenue coming in to pay the folks who are showing up every day to work and need to be paid. So yes, I agree, we need comprehensive tax reform. Realistically, there's not much the legislature can do about property taxes without changing our Constitution. And our income tax structure is such that the most profound way To change it without losing the ability to fund critical services would be to raise rates, and this is not the time to do that. I, too, am not in favor of how we tax Social Security benefits. It's double taxation, and it unfairly targets those who are living on fixed incomes. But getting rid of that tax is going to cost the state at least $90 million, and we need to have a way to fill that hole before we dig it. So that leaves gross receipt taxes. Like Senator Gould said, it's often described as Swiss cheese because it is so full of exemptions. And what we know is that when you give one group an exemption, the rest of us pay more. So we need to simplify our GRT code. We need to get rid of all of the sweetheart exemptions that have made it in there. And in doing so, broaden the base so that we can reduce the rate overall for everyone. And really, the ultimate goal would be to transition away from GRT to a sales tax, where we tax the good only, rather than pyramiding taxes all along the supply chain like we do now with GRT. Because let's be honest, those taxes all end up getting rolled into the final price, and New Mexico consumers are the ones who end up getting stuck with the bill.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Duhigg. Okay, so next question's coming right back to you. So, on this, tell us first of all where your campaign signs were purchased. Were they purchased in Sandoval County, Bernalillo County, New Mexico, or out of state? But also, in the state of New Mexico, we have a number of state, city, county contracts that go out every year. And a good amount of those are going to out-of-state companies. So that said, not only can you please tell us where you got your campaign signs from, but also, how could we help New Mexico businesses be awarded more contracts in this state? Ms. Duhigg, you're first.
So I'm proud to say that my signs were both made and purchased locally in Albuquerque. And we need to be careful whenever we talk about giving preferences to in-state businesses. We can do that, but if the state gets too heavy-handed in it, we risk running afoul of the Interstate Commerce Clause of the U.S. Constitution. So the question is, how do we incentivize New Mexico companies to win state contracts? One way that has been upheld is to give a scoring preference for local businesses that's done at a level that doesn't unfairly prejudice out-of-state companies. Another way would be to work in a public-private partnership to make sure that our New Mexico businesses have everything they need to put together a competitive proposal. But another issue is that right now our procurement code allows for what's called, it's referred to as piggyback contracts. So if a company already has a contract with a governmental entity, then another governmental entity can piggyback onto that contract without it going out to bid. And while this certainly creates an efficiency, it also creates an anti-competitive environment. So for example, my business might be the right size to compete for a contract here in Sandoval County, but we weren't the right size for that same kind of contract in Bernalillo County, so we didn't get it. With no bid piggybacking, my business is automatically going to be frozen out in Sandoval County, even though it might be the best option for Sandoval, just because it wasn't the right fit in Bernalillo. And so in order to make sure that piggybacking doesn't interfere with competitiveness in New Mexico, we may want to look at a model similar to what the state does now with sole source contracts, where it gives 30 days of notice so that folks have a chance to object if appropriate. That way, in a situation like my Sandoval-Bernalillo hypothetical, New Mexico companies that might be a great fit for Sandoval have the opportunity to put in for that contract, and there's a legitimate opportunity to be competitive.
Thank you, Ms. Duhigg. Senator Gould, same question.
Thank you. Well, you know, I think the answer to this is really very simple. First of all, my signs were purchased in Bernalillo County, which is 80% of the district. But it makes sense to use our government tax dollars back into our local economies. So there needs to be a simple way that we can make that happen to make sure that our local economy is supported by our own tax dollars. The issue we get into is those competitive pricing issues. So when you can get, we need to be responsible to our taxpayer dollars. When you can get something out of state for half the price, you get it in state, that's a problem. So that is really the issue of trying to match and balance getting the right competitive prices in state and keeping our tax dollars local. And just on a personal note, I've always purchased in my district and my personal and business needs. The whole time I've lived on the west side, once I moved over from the east side 20 years ago, I make sure that I purchase on the west side to support our local businesses. So I think that we can make that a much simpler process and make it happen.
Okay, thank you, Senator Gould. Okay, let's talk a little bit about education. So New Mexico funds education at a higher level than our states next to us, such as Arizona, Texas, Utah, and Colorado. Yet we're continually ranked 49th. This has been a big concern in the state of New Mexico for years. What is it something that the legislature could do to help improve education and get us off the bottom? Senator Gould, you're first.
I believe every child has the ability to learn. When I was elected, I asked to be on Senate Education because I wanted to be a part of this solution. When I came here from the East Coast in 9th grade, I had already learned what they were teaching in the classroom. And as a kid, I thought that was really cool. But as an adult, it concerns me greatly. And I haven't seen that change in the last 48 years. After 4 years of being on Senate Education, I can tell you I have the utmost respect for our teachers, for the hard work that they do every day. Rio Rancho school district is highly rated. Consistency of leadership, I think, is key. Rio Rancho's superintendent has been here for 20 years. She's so respected, they named a school after her. The change needs to be more than just in our schools. It takes a village. Rio Rancho is also a growing community and their businesses are expanding. Overall in New Mexico, what I hear over and over in the Senate Education is the high turnover in superintendents, the long-term substitute teachers, high truancy rates, toxic stress in our communities. We need to model our successful schools, reduce our wasteful spending. I supported our transparency and accountability in spending in our schools. Quality early childhood education is vital to our success. And local control, those schools know best how to help their kids. I also think that rating our land grant fund further is not the answer. Rio Rancho has proven they're one of the lowest funded schools with a high rating.
Thank you, Ms. Gould. Kind of a follow-up to that, since this district does include APS for a good majority of it, is there anything that the legislature could do to improve APS?
So that's a deep question. Again, I think that what I see is people come up, the 4 years that I've been there, they come up year after year with their ideas, but until we really get down with the teachers and know what's going on in the classroom and what's going to make a difference for those kids, the laws that we put in are sometimes hindering to their ability to teach. And so I think that without talking to the people doing the work before we have our ideas and legislation is the key. I can't imagine what it's like when the teachers get the new string of legislation that we put in for them to accommodate. And it's not serving our kids. The kids are the ones that we should be focusing on the most. And I think once we do that, the change will come naturally.
Okay, thank you, Senator Gould. Okay, let's go to Ms. Duhigg for the same question again around education. So education right now, first question was on education, we're funding it at a high rate, more than our surrounding states, but we're not seeing the performance. What can the legislature do?
So when we talk about being 49th in education, we often don't talk about the things outside the classroom that make it hard for kids to learn. We have high rates of poverty, food insecurity, adverse childhood experiences, and now on top of everything else, COVID. And there are a lot of things that the state can do to improve educational outcomes, like investing in pre-K, striking at root causes of adverse childhood experiences, and standardizing trauma-informed approaches to teaching. But apart from all that, we can't look at education and jobs separately. Parents need good jobs in order to give their kids the support they need to succeed in school, and kids need good educations in order to get good jobs in the future. So one of the best things that the legislature can do to improve education in New Mexico is to focus on multi-generational approaches to these issues that address the needs of parents and children at the same time. So for example, if a kid goes to a high-quality childcare and they learn to read, but then they go home to parents who can't read or who are unavailable to read with that kid, the impact of that early learning experience is diminished. Similarly, if a parent participates in a workforce training program, but then they don't have access to safe and affordable childcare, they might not be able to accept or keep the job that they've just been trained for. With a multi-generational approach, workforce development and childcare assistance programs would be paired together, as would things like child literacy and adult education programs. And there's data that shows that doing it this way leads to better outcomes for both parents and children, and it increases the value of both sets of services, resulting in a better return on investment. And in most cases, this multi-generational approach aligns and links existing systems and funding streams, which means that you get that increased return on investment without having to create new problems or spend additional dollars.
So, Ms. Duhigg, I'll ask you the same follow-up question since your district is largely in Albuquerque and has APS schools. What are your thoughts? What can the legislature do to help improve APS?
You know, I think it starts with getting everyone at the table, not only APS, but the parents and the teachers and the educational assistants, and all of the stakeholders need to come together on these issues in order to craft a comprehensive approach that's actually going to make a difference. I think the other big thing is building in accountability. APS is a massive, massive district, and it has a massive budget. And there needs to be accountability to not only the legislature, but to parents and to kids. And I don't know that that focus has been successful in the past.
Okay, thank you. So, Ms. Duhigg, let's stay on education a little bit. So, career technical education in particular. So, in New Mexico, we have a number of our college graduates that are leaving the state. But a different one out there that doesn't get a lot of talking, that people talk about, but it doesn't get a lot in the legislature, is career technical education. A lot of youth are not getting the career technical education in high school or in college because there's not enough funding for it. So they're leaving the state and getting it there, and then they find a job in whatever state they ended up in and don't come back. So what is your thought on expanding funding for career technical education? And second part to that is how do we connect businesses with our youth?
So New Mexico has so much to offer, and I'm raising my son here, and I want him to stay. But we can't expect our kids to stay here if we can't offer them career opportunities and the ability to thrive. So there's a couple of things that we are doing right in this area, and that should continue. That would be funding JTIP and providing high-wage tax credits. But clearly we need to do more. And I'd like to highlight a program that was built here in New Mexico and that's doing exactly the kind of work that we should be doing as a state. And it's called Future Focused Education. And this is a group that pairs high school students with over 60 local businesses to provide meaningful and paid work experiences, while they're also getting certifications and training necessary so that they can start work as a full-fledged employee once they graduate. The employers pay a flat fee, and the nonprofit handles the payroll, the insurance, the onboarding. I would love to see our state partner with more groups like that, and also provide incentives to local employers to participate in those kinds of programs. But the other thing that we need to do is to match the over $9 million in federal funding that we get for career and technical education, CTE, which I understand the majority of states already do, but we do not. CTE partners with businesses to prepare our students for tomorrow's workforce, and it fulfills employer needs in high-skill, high-wage, in-demand areas. And we've seen this kind of CTE approach work, specifically with CNM in the film industry. We should be leveraging those federal CTE dollars to expand this approach to other industries as well. But overall, these approaches work best when government is working as a partner with New Mexico businesses, which is why I'll advocate to always have all of you at the table when we're addressing these issues so that we stay ahead of the curve instead of playing catch up.
Great, thank you, Ms. Duhigg. Senator Gould, same question.
So this one's very close to my heart. My daughter and son-in-law are born and raised in New Mexico, educated at NMSU, and left to get the jobs they were seeking in Arizona. They're the classic brain drain, and one thing I want to mention about that is it's not just that generation that we're losing my peer generation because we want to be close to our grandkids. We have had a declining population over the last 10 years, and I think that's a big factor in that. I am actually a product of what was ICT at the time, is now DECA. When I was young, I just wanted to work, and I've spent my life in the workforce. That ICT program was very instrumental in getting me in. I worked in the afternoons in a little dental office, and left school to do that instead of taking elective classes. It was very productive for me, and I was ready to go to work when I left school. Rio Rancho has a really quality DECA program. They are connecting, just like the other program we talked about, these students with their internships, with the local businesses, getting them the soft skills that they need to continue. Soft skills are really a huge issue that we have. Our businesses are talking about it all the time. That gives them the soft skills they need. Supporting the CTE programs, there has been a lot of work in the legislature. We talk about it in Senate Ed all the time, where we've been ensuring funding, getting CTE credits for graduation, starting early college and high school. The healthcare fields are most likely to be the highest competitive employment field in the future. Trades that aren't replaced by automation, 21st century jobs like coding. Young people can be ready for work if they choose not to go to college.
Okay, thank you, Senator Gould. Okay, next question's coming right back to you again. So we're going to shift gears a little bit. We're going to talk about infrastructure. Particularly here in New Mexico, we have a lot of aging roads. We need new roads, especially on the west side here where we're expanding rapidly. Bridges are outdated. Some bridges that we're using today are about 100 years old and are probably not very safe. In addition to that, highways are needed. So in saying that, where do you stand on a potential infrastructure bill? And in addition to that is a potential road, which is Paseo del Volcan. Where do you stand on that road as well?
So I absolutely would support an infrastructure bill. We actually had a bill in the last session just dedicated to roads, and then when COVID hit, we had to veto it. That broke my heart because I was really excited about the roads that we could put in. It has been a priority in my capital outlay funding. A bill like this will probably take a few years in this economic environment to fund, but I think we need to start the infrastructure and start the plan, even though we may not have the money this year to fully fund. Paseo del Volcan is also very close to my heart. I was very excited to hear about it 4 years ago, and I've been prioritizing funding for that. Not just that, but I found that Rio Rancho had flooding issues that needed to be corrected before we could actually put in our roads. So I've been working with SCAFTA to correct those flooding issues, which they tell me are done, and we can start working on our roads. The goal is to bring jobs to the west side. 80% of our workforce is still crossing the bridge to work to the east side. So that has been a top priority of mine. I think it's the best use of our capital outlay is to build the infrastructure that builds our future. We talked earlier about manufacturing jobs, I think. I know I was thinking about them, coming to New Mexico. I think that, we need to be ready for this. We need to be ready for the shift in our economy that's going to happen after the COVID economic recovery, and infrastructure is key to bringing those jobs.
Okay, thank you, Senator Gould. Ms. Duhigg, same question, please.
And so much like with the taxes question, I think this is actually an issue where Senator Gould and I agree. Growing our infrastructure is a critical piece of attracting businesses and bringing more jobs, especially here in Rio Rancho and on Albuquerque's west side. I also support the expansion of Paseo de Volcan, in large part because of the new Amazon distribution center, which is going to provide about 1,000 jobs. There's also a balancing act here, because especially given the constraints currently on our state budget, we need to make sure that we're not pouring so much investment into the shiny new thing that we ignore our existing roadways that people are relying on day in and day out. So I would want to make sure that we are making it a point to keep a focus on Paseo del Norte and UNSER. And we also need to be realistic. Because of our budget crisis, come January, the legislature is going to need to prioritize meeting the immediate needs of New Mexicans and New Mexico small businesses, which are the engines of our economy. So this might be something that does take a little while to get done. My concern with not fully funding projects is that what we see is that when projects are not fully funded, that money just sits there and then eventually reverts. And those are funds that could be used productively in other areas in the meantime. So once we are able to fully fund, and even just fully fund a segment of each project, I support the state doing so. But we need to be careful about not doing full funding in a responsible way.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Duhigg. Okay, so that concludes our questions for today. So let's go straight to closing statements. Ms. Duhigg, you're up first.
Thanks. So thank you again to all the sponsors for putting this forum on. Conversations like this are an example of what's best in politics these days. And I would suggest that if our presidential debates were more like this conversation here today, we would all be better served. And I know this is a little odd in our current political climate, but I also really want to thank Senator Gould for being here, for running for this position. We're both running because we care deeply about public service, even if we have different ideas about what that might entail. And in some areas, we have the same ideas. But I'm running because I have a unique vision of how to represent District 10. Like I said when I began, I believe in good government, and I believe that when government is good, we all prosper. I've spent my career putting people before politics and policy before partisanship, and that's what I'm going to continue to do as your state senator. So if you'd like to learn more about me or talk to me about issues that are important to you, please feel free to reach out to me at my website. It's katyduhigg.com. It's spelled a little bit funny. It's Katyduhigg. But I would love nothing more than to have folks in the district reach out to me and tell me what's important to you. Thanks so much.
Thank you. So Senator Gould, final closing statements.
Being a state senator the last 4 years has been the greatest honor of my life. It was not something that I ever sought to do. When I was asked to do it, I just knew in my soul it was the right thing to do. And I am so very grateful that I made the decision and was honored by being elected in 2016. My best part of this job is when I get to meet our constituents. We have amazing people in District 10. The kindness that is shown does not reflect in what's going on in our national politics. I am very grateful for that as well. We can together make New Mexico the best that it can be. There is no reason why we struggle with the things we do. We can come together. Government is best when the ideas of both parties come together, work together, find the solutions that really serve the people of our great state. I am concerned about the balance in Santa Fe. We have had one party ruling for 90 years in our legislature, in control of our legislature for 90 years. It is now in a supermajority. That does concern me because we lose the best of both ideas when that happens. I also just have to say, and sorry, Ms. Duhigg, but I protect pre-existing conditions, and I would never remove those from your health care. So thank you very much, and I hope that you support me in November 3rd.
We are very excited that we have with us today Craig Brandt, Senate District 40. As you might have heard at the end of the last event that we just finished, is Teresa Leger Fernandez was not able to attend today, so we had a change in schedule. So at the bottom of the hour, we will have the Republican candidate for U.S. Congress, Alexis Johnson, with us as well at the bottom of the hour. But right here at the top of the hour, we have Senator Craig Brandt, Senate District 40, running unopposed. We thought we'd take an opportunity while we have some time to kind of hear from him and what's upcoming in the legislature and what are some of the challenges there. So with that, welcome, Senator Brandt. How are you today?
I'm doing great. Thank you for the opportunity to come and to be here today.
Absolutely. So let's just get right on into it. So we've had a lot of candidates here the past couple days, yesterday and today. We've talked about a lot of different things. So let's just bring it out in the air right now. So the pandemic has created really a crazy 2020. So what can you champion coming up in the next year?
Well, I think we need to look at several things. We need to continue to deal with the education fiasco, and we'll talk about that later on in our state. But we need to talk about some of the unchecked balance of powers that were given to the governor. Whether you feel comfortable or you're happy with the way the governor has dealt with this pandemic, there's no checks and balances right now on anything that she's doing. And we really need to have, that's our government is founded as a republic, and we're supposed to have those checks and balances in place. And so we really need to go back and look at, how long can one of these orders be put into place? At what point do you need to bring in the legislature as another branch of government to say, yeah, we need to keep going with this, or maybe we have some ideas that we could do to make things better. And so that's one of the things we really are going to have to look at as we are going forward and coming up in this next session. Okay.
Yeah, it's been a very different year, that's for sure. So in association with that, oil prices, the whole 9 yards, we're going to have a huge budget deficit. So, what are you guys going to do to address it? It's going to be a big challenge this year.
Yeah, we really got hit with a double whammy. We started out the year with oil prices going down. Oil prices went down before COVID. Most people don't remember that because COVID has taken over everything of our lives. But oil prices actually went down before there was a big, OPEC and the Russians and Saudi Arabia were fighting amongst each other to try to devalue oil. They did a great job of it. Oil dropped down to about $30 a barrel. Then we had COVID hit. So what happened then, everyone stopped driving because the entire United States went into mainly a lockdown for 30 days. Mm-hmm. So no one was driving, so the demand for oil went down, so that dropped the price even more to prices that we hadn't seen since the 70s when it comes to oil. And so that just devastated our budget because about 40% of our budget is made up in oil and gas revenue. We saw gas go up a little bit, but gas has been so low for the last 10 years, it really is oil is what we make our budget out of. And then you have the gross receipts tax got destroyed because we shut every business down. Right. And then one of the industries that we've been doing really good with is tourism. And that, of course, has been decimated, and it doesn't help when we are telling people, don't come to our state or you're going to have to quarantine. So really the only tourism we have is within state travel, and that just doesn't generate much money. And so we have a huge issue. It's a little bit better than we thought. So we were thinking we'd probably go into next year about $2 billion short. I think it's going to be about $1 to $1.5 billion. And so how are we going to deal with that? We went into the special session and spent a lot of what we had in reserve, so we're not going to have a lot of reserves left. To the governor's credit, she has done a hiring freeze and tried to save money in that way. You only save so much that way. And so we're going to have to come back, we're going to have to make cuts, and we're going to have to look at, what are some investments we can make to really spur the economy to get it back on track quickly.
Yeah, it's a big challenge, and when you look at it, you're looking at, 50% of the jobs in hospitality are gone. And U.S. Chamber is saying, 30% aren't coming back. So that's pretty much, if we looked at just that 30% and said 30% of that revenue is not coming back to the state,
right,
that's a huge impact.
Yeah, and I don't know the exact numbers on the hospitality revenue to the state. It's probably, it's one of our larger ones, but remember, oil and gas was probably about $3 billion. So, I'm not going to guess at how much the hospitality industry is. But yeah, 30% of that is a big hit. We're still having a big hit on oil and gas. The projections were $55 a barrel. We're nowhere near that. We're not going to be anywhere near that, because you still don't have the demand that we had before COVID. It's building back up, but it's nowhere near where it was. So there's a lot of issues we're going to have to deal with, but we do need to figure out what to do with our hospitality industry. I'm really concerned about restaurants, especially small restaurants. We're still only allowing them to be open at 25%. That is going to keep them from thriving. It's going to keep them from surviving for a lot of them. These mom and pop restaurants, your chains are probably going to be okay, right? Your big chains, I'm not going to mention any names, but your big chains are probably going to be fine. It's going to be those mom and pop restaurants, those people that have forked out of their own pocket to basically invest in their life's dream, and those dreams have been destroyed.
Is there anything that the legislature could do to help those small businesses? We're going into the colder season right now in New Mexico. The weather, you can't pick a better place in the entire country where to be right now. The weather is just outstanding. But you know what? Rounding the corner, we've had a lot of balloon fiestas, which is canceled. And balloon fiestas, I can count a whole bunch of them that had snow. So these outdoor venues for restaurants just, sooner or later, they're not going to work anymore. So is there anything the legislature could do? You guys are meeting in the wintertime. Is there something you guys can do to help these businesses?
Well, the problem's going to be, it's going to be too little too late. We don't meet until January. This is one of the reasons that we should have the ability to come in, and the governor should have called us in, not just for the special session to get some adjustments made to the budget, but to actually deal with the situation that we're dealing with. We have 3 branches of government, not 1 or 2. And the third, our branch, the legislative branch, has been completely left out of the ball game and told, we don't want your opinion, we don't want anything from you. Come in January and fix the mess that we've created. It's going to be too little too late. How many businesses can survive for almost a year with their business closed down? Only your big chains are going to be able to survive that, because the only ones that have deep enough pockets to do it. You have, Congress has done some things, and we have the PPP, and actually that money isn't even completely spent yet. We actually have a lot of businesses in New Mexico that haven't applied for that, and I think they just see the writing on the wall and say, okay, so I do this, I try to keep things open, I have no customers, how am I going to even meet the obligations that's required in that? And then we're going to go into a session where we're $1.5 billion short. So how do you help the businesses and keep the basic fundamentals of our economy running, or our state government running? And the only answer is we're going to have to cut back our state government.
Yeah, that's that's a challenge that it's upcoming, and you bring up some great points that got to be addressed. It's going to be really challenging. In association with that, something else that we've been discussing with these candidates that have been here yesterday and today is really around bringing investment to New Mexico. One of the things that I hear at the Chamber of Commerce is, well, New Mexico has too many laws. It's really a struggle to do business here. Small businesses feel overwhelmed with different rules, guidelines, regulations. What can you guys look at at the next session that could help this out?
Yeah, we really need to look at fixing our regulatory structure in New Mexico. We have, I think, probably more regulations than any other state. One of the things that we have, we have a license for everything. I think you have to have a license to be a dog walker in this state. Not literally, but it's almost that bad. That I think you have to have a license to leave your front yard or something. I remember living in England that you had to have a license to have a screen on your window, and we're just about there in New Mexico, right? So we really need to cut back on the regulations that we have. We really need to look at, and we need to talk to these businesses that are looking at coming in, and businesses that have come in here and say, what was the worst regulatory item that you had to deal with? And how can we make that better? Those are just simple things of going out to the businesses and saying, how can we make it easier for you as a business owner, to either run your business or start a business in New Mexico? And then we need to go to the Regulation and Licensing Bureau and say, these are the things that need to be cut out. One of the things we also need to do is the Regulation and Licensing puts in all these regs. They're never looked at by the legislature. There's no review. So we actually need to have a review process. We've got this interim committee system that is completely broken and a total waste of taxpayers' money. Maybe we could have a committee that actually just, looks at on a monthly basis, what are the regulations that are being proposed, what are the regulations that are there, and why do we need them?
So in saying that, so point of clarification, Arizona and New Mexico became a state at about the same time, and the most recent statistic I saw is New Mexico has almost twice as many laws or regulations as Arizona. So if I'm hearing you right, what you're saying is a lot of the regulations that our businesses are being challenged with today never saw the light of day in the legislature. They were just created by previous departments or whatever under previous administrations.
Yeah, so what happens is, and one of the fallacies of our legislature is that in almost every law we give the regulatory authority to the regulatory body. Why? Because we only meet once a year, is one of the reasons. So, and now trust me, we do not want to meet more than once a year or more than what we do. We cause enough damage in the little time we're up there.
Right.
But we need to have any regulations that are being proposed ought to come back to the legislature and say, yes, that is exactly what we meant with that bill. I've written a lot of bills, had a few of them passed, and a few of them signed into law. And some of those bills, they write the regulatory language for it, send it back to me, and I'm like, that's not what I said in the bill at all. What are you talking about?
Right.
So that needs to come back to the legislature to be reviewed by either an interim committee that has the final approval, or comes back to the person who actually sponsored the bill that says, no, that's not what was meant, that's not what was intended, nor is it what the bill says. But there's nothing along those lines that's done to make sure that those regulations are actually in compliance with the laws.
Gotcha. So we have a lot of work to go, it sounds like.
We do, yeah.
All right, so let's just go ahead and shift gears a little bit on education. So in New Mexico, we actually do a very nice job of funding education. We do better than Arizona, Texas, Utah, Colorado. The challenge is we continually are at 49%. And I'm sorry, we're ranked 49th. So at 49, you know, that's the bottom, but we're not funding like we're at the bottom. So is there something the legislature can do that may be able to help education a little bit?
There's a lot that we need to do. First of all, even though I didn't agree with our last governor's eval system completely, you know, at least student achievement was part of that evaluation. It's been completely taken out. There's nothing in the current evaluation on student achievement, not the evaluation of a school, not the evaluation of a school district, not the evaluation of a teacher. And so if it's not about student achievement, what's it about? And so we need to work with the teachers and work with the superintendents on doing an evaluation system that's simple, that makes sense to everyone, but also make sure that our very best teachers are staying in the classroom, and quite frankly, our worst ones are being retrained to other careers. Really? How's that for a simple way of putting that? Wow. You know, and the other thing that we do provide, I think it's about 17th in the nation, or it was the last time I looked at it a few years ago, in per pupil funding. And yes, we're 49th. But we need to really take a serious look at, you know, this really ties back into regulation, believe it or not. It's hard to actually think that it does. But we have regulated so many reports and so many things to the districts that for the first time ever, there are districts in our state that are spending more money on administration than they are in the classroom.
Wow.
Which is amazing.
It is.
So we have so much administration in our state, and part of it is all these reports and all these things that everyone's supposed to be tracking, and they all have to send them back to Santa Fe. Every time you add a new report, every time you add something that has to be tracked, the district has to hire someone to do that. And so that costs money that doesn't get to our students. And so we need to really go back, streamline that, and say, this is what we actually need to know. This is what we actually need as far as information, and get rid of the rest so that they don't have to have so much administration to get the job done.
Yeah, so in a lot of schools, you know, Rio Rancho does an outstanding job when it comes to education. APS down the road, not so much. But, you know, one of the challenges there is you don't have a compliance officer per se. You have a compliance officer in an entire department just to fill out all the necessary paperwork for the federal government and then the state government, and then it just continues on, right?
That's correct. And it's not just one staff person doing that. It's multiple, because every time we add something new to comply with, you've got to have, you know, the larger the district, the more people have to track those numbers.
Yeah, that's a challenge. And then, you know, in other areas, for instance, Rio Rancho is underfunded. You know, they've been underfunded for school buses forever.
Right.
How do you get the kids to school? And now when you talk to the school district, how that money is given to the schools is based on how many students in a bus. And right now, you know, you don't have that many kids on a bus because it's virtual school, or parents, you know, Rio Rancho's gone to the hybrid, but even on the hybrid, a lot of parents are driving their kids to school. So that's going to hurt them on funding as well. I think I heard from Rio Rancho Public Schools, they may be out of money by the mid-year.
Yeah, the transportation issue is one I've actually tried to deal with several times in Santa Fe. Was on a committee that worked on it for 2 years. We took legislation to the rest of the body, and, you know, for some reason it ends up becoming this, you know, winners and losers situation every time you try to change any formula for education in Santa Fe. And so it's been really difficult to get things passed. Rio Rancho consistently spends millions of dollars out of their operational budget to run buses. Now, transportation is a state obligation, not a district obligation. It is really up to the state.
Yeah.
The districts do it, because they want to make sure their students are at school, but it's really an obligation of the state. But you've got Rio Rancho spending money out of their operational, but you've got other districts. I know Grants for years had extra money. Yeah. They were being overpaid for transportation. And so what we really need to do is change the way we're doing that completely, have PED look at, what are you spending on transportation? Is that reasonable? And if it is, then we need to be funding it from Santa Fe and not having the districts fund it.
It seems like it'd make more sense on per mile than per pupil, because you can get 30 on a bus, or you can get 10 on a bus, but it seems like it'd make more sense on a mileage basis, especially spread out as Rio Rancho is.
Yeah, and this year is going to be very different because, again, COVID is changing everything. And so they're going to have to make some executive decisions at PED as to how they're going to deal with the transportation issue. It's not the budget to transportation isn't going down. They've got the same amount of money. They're just going to have to figure out how to hold the districts harmless, right, in that area this year.
Yeah, another area in education that we've been talking about the past couple of days has been career technical education. From that standpoint, New Mexico has not funded it to the level that it needs to be. That being said, since it hasn't been properly funded, a lot of high schools or areas around the state, they don't have the ability for kids that don't want to go to college to get a CTE degree in some way or fashion. So we have a huge shortage, and the ironic part is those jobs pay as well, if not better in a lot of cases, than a college degree does. So how do we turn that around in the state? How do we get more funding in CTE?
Well, I think it's a great question. It's something that when I was on the Rio Rancho School Board, I started trying to do. Rio Rancho has done a really great job with educating people and getting them ready to go to college. Quite frankly, the one shortfall for Rio Rancho Public Schools has been career technical. Not to toot my horn too much, but last year it's one of the reasons I used some of the money I was given to actually fund, because there's a couple of different things in funding career technical. One is you've got to fund the initial equipment cost. And that is one of the things that people don't think about. So I gave about $100,000 to Rio Rancho Public Schools to buy the initial equipment for their automotive program that they've started. Also gave them money to pay the first year salary for their automotive instructor. And so that way they could get that off the ground and get that started. They're looking at, they're doing a nursing program and a couple other programs that they're starting in Rio Rancho now. And so I'm really excited to see that change happen, but it's more expensive to do career technical education than it is to do your regular 30 students in a classroom, because it's more hands-on. You can't have 30 students in a classroom in auto shop. You might be able to have 10 or 15 at the most to do it safely. Same thing with your nursing program. You can't have 30 students. You can in the book learning, but not in that hands-on. And so it is more expensive, and we're going to have to figure out a factor for that. And as a state, if we really want that, we're going to have to get serious about it and do it. But you're absolutely right. There are a massive amount of jobs in plumbing, in electrical, in auto mechanics. Nursing is a huge shortage in our state.
It is.
And so there's a lot of jobs in those that you don't necessarily have to go to 4 years of college. You can get a 2-year nursing degree and get started in nursing right away, or within 2 years. But we have some students actually finishing in schools. As they graduate high school, they've got that 2 years and they're ready. Yeah. And so we need to really invest in that for students that either they don't want to go to college at all, or they don't want to right now. I was one of those students.
Okay.
So when I graduated from high school, it was, thank God I graduated from high school. I was done with school and I went straight into the military because I didn't have any other skills. 10 years later, I went back to college. I went to college and got my degree. And so that's the path for a lot of people.
Yeah, you fit that path perfectly, because a lot of folks will get that certificate, get a good paying job, because we do have a poverty problem in this state, and that gets them going in the right direction. And then later on, I know a lot of folks that are business owners today They got that initial certificate, and they actually went back and got a college degree, a 4-year degree that added on top of that because they had the confidence and the ability, and as well as the monetary side of it, to get a full education. So it made a huge difference.
Well, let's look at the plumbing model. You know, you go and you get your certificate to be a plumber, and you're out there working with a plumber and doing a job and making pretty decent money, and you say, you know, I'd really like to start my own plumbing company.
Right.
But you don't really know how to do that. So you start taking some college courses in business management. And you get your associate's degree or your bachelor's degree in business management, and then you're able to start the business side of being a plumber. And now you're doing much better because I think just about every plumbing company in the state of New Mexico is doing great.
Right. So last question that I had for you, you know, Paseo del Volcan is a potential road extension that could bring a lot of development. You know, Amazon's going out there on the I-40 section, but infrastructure is something that's desperately needed in the state. What's your thoughts on that?
Well, we have a huge shortfall of infrastructure. We have about $6 billion worth of infrastructure just in bridges that needs to be dealt with in our state. You know, I don't like to blame past legislatures, but this is one that is on their back. You know, we put $1.2 billion into a railroad, the rail runner, and a spaceport.
Right.
That came directly out of roads funds. That would have been money that would have been able to deal with some of these issues. If you look at, that's been 10 years, actually more than that now. That money would have been able to be put into roads, the compounding interest on that. We wouldn't have the full $6 billion, but we'd be a long ways towards it. Paseo del Volcan, I've been a huge supporter of. I've put a lot of capital outlay into that road. I believe for Rio Rancho that road is critical to bringing, you know, base jobs here, to bringing those fundamental jobs that earn people a lot of money so that they don't have to cross the bridge or the bridges to get into Albuquerque to work a career job. And so we need to bring those jobs to Rio Rancho, and the only way we're going to bring those jobs to the west side is to have a direct path like Paseo del Volcan that will provide.
Yes, that's hugely important. So with that, Senator Brand, we really appreciate you being here today. It's been very enlightful the past couple days, and great to hear from you to kind of talk about this upcoming session and some of the challenges that we have. So thank you again for being with us today.
Thank you for the opportunity. Appreciate it.
Absolutely. Let's talk to Alexis Johnson, who's with us today. So Alexis. Well, good. I'm glad that you could join us today. So, absolutely. So let's just get right into it. So why have you decided to run for Congress?
want their voices to be heard, and specifically those areas of pro-life. You know, I'm a pro-life mother, especially in those late stages. I'm also pro-Second Amendment. And so those are the two main reasons that I was seeing New Mexican voice not being heard. I believe in the Constitution, and I believe that we need to live safely, but I also know that we need to respect, you know, our life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. And I have that ability in a crisis or no crisis. You know, when I graduated college with an engineering degree, I did not have employment. I want to see opportunity here in New Mexico, and that's one thing that it is not an inclusive economy where people of all different skill levels and ages can find employment. I had to move out of New Mexico in order to find employment. And so these are some of the things that I'd like to see change. I would like to see New Mexicans have a voice at the table. And specifically, what I mean by that is a lot of outside interests come into New Mexico and tell New Mexicans what those values are. And you can see that with different candidates. They will back those people that are donating these large sums of money. So when I got into this race for District 3, I saw a lot of money going into my opponent from very extreme groups and those that do not represent traditional family values. So I'm here to bring traditional family values back into policy here in New Mexico, and those are hard work, perseverance, grit, and the American way of life.
Great. So in going in with that, just continuing on this conversation, so what are 2 to 3 priorities that you plan on focusing in on?
Well, those priorities stem from about 4 elements that I see that we need. And those are that New Mexican wants to be able to put food on the table. They want to put a roof over their head, educate their children, and do this in a safe environment. So leading into that, those all need to be able to have an environment that is safe. So I promote, law and order. I promote infrastructure and economy development here in New Mexico, especially in this northern corridor, where I see we can have manufacturing jobs, where we can have, the ability to really say that we are not a poor state, we are not last, and say that we are first. We are first in the diversity, the beauty, and the awesome resources that we have, not only in Rio Rancho, but I'm talking about, Los Alamos, and some of the wonderful natural resources that we have in this state, such as our oil and gas, our mining capabilities, and also our nuclear research. So I think there's a lot of areas for growth, a lot of areas for development in technology, in manufacturing, in tourism, and I think that we really need to get a return on our investment that we are putting in to some of the programs here in New Mexico. The average person needs to know that their money is going somewhere. For instance, when you talk about the film industry, and we have New Mexicans getting really excited about being in film, well, that's a limited job when you don't have agents that are from New Mexico, you don't have directors that are here. We need to create career pathways for New Mexicans to have jobs here, not just extras, and then have the government providing a lot of funding for this, and we're not getting that return on investment. So that's my priority. I'm an engineer by trade. I'm a very solutions-based candidate, and I really want to work with everyone from all different sides of the spectrum in regards to political party. I think it's time here in New Mexico that we start opening the doors instead of closing the doors, and we need to have some balance to our leadership here in New Mexico, which would be composed of a servant leader versus just a boss telling you what to do. I'm not running this U.S. congressional race to be anyone's boss. I'm here to come to the constituents, have a conversation, and work in the best interests of New Mexicans.
Okay, well, thank you. So in following up with that, Representative Ben Ray Lujan has been in this district for a long time. Now he's running for Senate. So he's vacating the seat. So how are you different than Ben Ray Lujan?
Well, first of all, Ben Ray Lujan has been around here about 12 years, and I truly believe in term limits. So one thing that I just want to say off the bat is we really need to make sure that we don't have anyone in government that is not representing the New Mexican interests. Right now, we are talking about broadband and internet access. Well, this could have been had prior to this time, before COVID hit. And so Ben Ray has really been in there for 12 years, and I don't see the growth in New Mexico that I feel that we should have. As far as employment is concerned, development infrastructure, from our roads to our broadband internet to perhaps corridors up in the north where we could go through these federal lands and provide access to create more tourism here in New Mexico. So I haven't seen Ben Ray Lujan really expanding in these avenues. And the difference between myself and Ben Ray Lujan is that I would make sure that I keep those promises, and that I would make sure I come back to New Mexico, speak with small business owners, speak with the community to make sure that their interests are served and the economy and education are robust and not waning.
Okay, thank you. So, the next question I had for you was, the federal government, it doesn't seem like we can get another stimulus going, and COVID-19 has really impacted New Mexico a whole lot. A lot of small businesses have already been sacrificed. So from that standpoint, what do you think you would be doing up in Washington to really help stimulate the New Mexican economy?
Well, we're going to still need some stimulus funds coming into the new session here in January. Whoever that may be, we need to make sure that funds are keeping the small business wheels turning. As coming from a small business family, we're having to make very difficult decisions. Even though we did receive money from the CARES Act, we are still going to have to be laying people off. These are families that are not going to be employed anymore. And we hate to do this, but the reality of it is we're going to still need to get through this silent war. And I would really seek in U.S. Congress to come up with different types of legislation that would be business friendly to make sure that we can get through this together. But we still need some financial assistance until we're in the clear come December and also January if there's any recurrence of this COVID wave. So, I would definitely be for helping those small businesses and also entrepreneurs, or perhaps retrofitting the business so that you could, make sure that you're training your employees or converting different areas so that we can be more health
Gotcha. Okay. In northern New Mexico, we've lost a lot of high-paying jobs in the energy fields, whether it's mining or oil and gas or electricity, for instance, in Farmington. So what ideas do you have to recover some of those lost jobs?
In Mexico, especially here in the north, from Santa Fe onwards, we see a lot of regulations promulgated at the state level that are adverse to business and common sense. So as your next U.S. Congresswoman, I would look to make sure that ideas such as the Green New Deal are not brought to the table, because quite frankly, if it doesn't make dollars, it doesn't make sense. And we need to take into account, yes, the environment, but we do not need to leave New Mexicans out as far as not being employed. Our energy portfolio, with 39% of revenue in the state coming from oil and gas, is an example of we really need to make sure that these jobs are there, and we need to open, New Mexico, because we cannot have our economy closed forever. We need to focus on diversifying. There's nothing wrong with diversifying the economy, such as technology jobs, working with some of our government entities such as Los Alamos or Sandia Labs to make sure that we can mentor or support other business ventures here in New Mexico. So I do not support extremism. I do not support the Green New Deal, because I think that we really need to work together.
Okay, thank you. So in kind of continuing this conversation around jobs, so with the pandemic, Santa Fe and other areas of northern New Mexico is really dependent on tourism. And in saying that, of course, with the pandemic, that has really limited tourism. And, according to the U.S. Chamber of Commerce, those jobs won't return for at least 2 to 3 more years, which is going to create an opportunity for trying to recreate jobs and figure out where some of these folks that were in the tourism or restaurants or hotel industry can find a new position. What are your thoughts on what we could do to train or help replace those jobs and revenue?
You know, it all goes down to that entrepreneur and that small business owner here in New Mexico. We have a lot of really talented individuals, and we need to stimulate innovation. I am sad to hear, you know, tourism is not expected to return for 2 to 3 years. I think that's quite a stretch. I do believe that we do not need to, you know, slam the door and say tourism is not coming back anytime soon. You know, I think we can do this safely, get through this pandemic safely, but I do not think that tourism needs to go out the door. You know, I encourage people to, you know, retrofit their, perhaps hotels or restaurants, but, you know, I am not for transferring tourism into another industry. I think that New Mexico can still have that tourism, even for our own population versus outside. You know, when the borders are closed, we can't have people coming in and out as frequently. But there are a lot of New Mexicans who are shut down in their homes and have not been able to go out. You know, our parks and everything like this. We should, you know, see what we can do to be safe and make sure that we stimulate our tourism sector. So I do not agree with shutting the door to tourism for the next 2 to 3 years. Policies that can change are making sure that we provide funding that will keep these innovators thinking about, can they sell things online? Can they maybe branch out in their hotel to offer another service and start really innovating and thinking about what we can do to continue with business and just adapt. So the policy changes that I would advocate for are providing more funding come January, February, March, whenever we have a slowdown in our hotel industry and perhaps tourism. You know, make sure that they have funding to continue and come out of this pandemic.
Yes, definitely. So, you know, one of the things that's out there is potentially, unless there is a cure for coronavirus, that it looks like that in the state of New Mexico you won't be able to have events with over 100 people. So that means such things as the Spanish market and Indian market won't be able to return. And those are huge parts of the economy up there, and that could also have a continuing effect with other areas. So any thoughts on that?
You know, I think we need to really look if this is making sense for New Mexico, you know, especially in these areas with low risk and low numbers. Can we practice all these protective measures such as your mask and your hand washing and your hand sanitizer, having outside events, maybe with smaller amount of people, but maybe in more of a higher frequency? You know, we can adapt and come to the table and make sure that we can still have an economy. Just because we're in a crisis does not mean that the individual should not be able to provide food on the table for their children. So we need to open businesses in areas with low risk. I think the blanket approach that has been put on New Mexico has been devastating, and it has not really given credit to all of the responsible business owners who have gone out of their way to refurbish their businesses and be sanitary so that we can continue to provide food and a roof over our head and do it in a safe manner. So, you know, we really need to open New Mexico.
Absolutely. So in continuing on to, let's talk about broadband a little bit. So, you know, the state legislature here in New Mexico says, of course, every year they discuss it, every year they can't come to the money to do it. And when you talk to state legislators, they say they need federal dollars to get broadband throughout New Mexico. And now with school being virtual, we are really seeing a lot of holes in the broadband. It's really hurting our kids because they're not able to attend school because it's virtual right now. How do you think you can get Congress behind you to get a broadband bill in place?
You know, at this point, and we have seen bills come into play, you know, advocating for the dollars needed for infrastructure. At this point, how many lives could be saved in Navajo Nation, in our Diné lands, if we have the broadband access where we're able to do the telehealth, we're able to, you know, get a handle on people that are infected, or if we have another wave, it's going to be very important moving forward. And that's really going to be, when you talk about priorities, that's really going to be up there, because not only do we need this for health, you know, and if you have a flu or something that's not even COVID, you know, to be at home and to work with your doctor, this is a health issue, and this is also an issue with education. Now, I would really like to see our children go back to school in these areas that we have low risk. You know, among children, we know that the risk is low. So we really need to get the children back in school, which would help our economy, and practice all of the safety measures. But, you know, I really think that we need to continue working together as a community, opening the doors to invite our business people in and asking about what your ideas are. My job is to listen and also come up with solutions, but you know, we're not the end-all be-all. We depend on people that have the expertise, such as our small business owners and our developers and the constituents in the community to serve your best interests. So I don't think there's going to be any problem getting internet connectivity to New Mexico with funding, because we have a major need, especially in our rural community, which is the majority of District 3.
Absolutely.
You know, quite frankly, Ben Ray took too long. He was talking about this a while back, and nothing really occurred. This could have been a different story had we had a lot of rural access.
Yes, thank you. So yeah, broadband is hugely important. Next question, staying with the same thing, is infrastructure. So we're seeing here, particularly in Sandoval County, we have a lot of bridges that are, you know, they're 50, 60, 70, 100 years old, as well as throughout northern New Mexico. So when it comes to roads, highways, and bridges, we really need infrastructure dollars into New Mexico. What would you do to get that targeted for our state?
You know, I would introduce legislation that would make sure that New Mexicans had jobs and the opportunity to have those jobs. So federal dollars coming into New Mexico for your roads and bridges would be essential, not only for employment, but also safety. You know, if you have any bridge with any type of faulting, it's an extreme danger to be going over these bridges and for them to have been checked as needing repair. So number one is the safety out there on the road, especially there in Albuquerque and other areas. We need to make sure that we're safe, and I would definitely fight for all the money that we can get here in New Mexico to reboost our economy, and also, you know, national defense. I think it's very important that we have funds in Los Alamos and there in Sandia Labs, and that includes your infrastructure, you know, highways and bridges, to make sure that we are able to, you know, function and do business.
So, Alexis, when it comes to infrastructure, you know, you have next to us in Texas, they're proposing a new highway, a new interstate that goes from basically Mexico to Denver, which is an extension of I-27. And then in Arizona, they have an extension of an interstate there that's going to go to Nogales all the way up to Reno. So what that'll do is you know, that would impact New Mexico, having a different north-south interstate on both sides. So that would affect us. One of the things that Sandoval County's been trying to do is get support for Paseo del Volcan to attach to, which would attach I-40 to 550 and allow a potential high-speed interstate or highway to go basically all the way up into the Four Corners. So you'd have nonstop from I-40 all the way up, which would help new tenants like Amazon, etc. So do you support Paseo del Volcan? And also, what are your thoughts around those two interstates and leaving New Mexico out?
Well, first of all, my main interest is making interest of New Mexicans. So, you know, we need to really look at, are these extensions and roads just a pass through, or are they really there to support the local economy? And all we know that, you know, national groups want to come in, national businesses, and they want to see these, you know, these major areas of transport, these roads and what have you. But we need to make sure that it is in the best interest of New Mexicans. So I definitely support jobs for New Mexicans, and I support having the resources that would attract these major companies. So, you know, I do support the extensions, but I think we also need to make sure that we're in conversation with the local community and business owners so that their interests are supported.
So when it comes to Paseo del Volcan, how do you feel about that?
I support the extension, because I think that all of us know the traffic and the congestion that we find there on 550. And so any type of improvements to this is going to be beneficial. But again, you know, I would really like to involve small business owners and the community in these conversations to make sure that their interests are served. You know, we need to make sure that this money is not just utilized for transport for those that are out of state. We want to make sure that our economy is supported right here in New Mexico.
Okay, thank you. So one last question I had for you, and it's making the news again today, but there is a lot of crimes out there that affect children. There's one that came out today where the mother is charges are being dropped because of mental illness. So it's really in New Mexico, we have some big issues such as homelessness, mental health, drug addictions, and those are really increasing crimes in the state, throughout the entire state. So what are your thoughts and concerns that you think you can make an impact on when it comes to these social issues?
Well, you know, mental illness, homelessness, as well as crime are really interconnected. From, you know, any type of catch and release to the border, to having the resources to fund substance abuse centers here in the north are going to be key. It's going to be a combined effort. It's a complex situation, and there's not a one size fits all, but we do need to have consequences for any type of criminal behavior. But we also need to know that people that are addicted to these substances need to have treatment. This is something that we cannot just not have empathy about and not understand. That is a chemical dependency, and these individuals need to come out of this so that they can be citizens in the community. You know, one area that I have a really big issue with is that New Mexico does not have a sex offender registry from those persons that are from out of state, and that is a travesty, and that is something I would advocate for the children of New Mexico, and that we get that on the books, and that we have funding for our substance abuse here in the north. Do you know, in this District 3, we have the top 2 highest rates of substance abuse, the top 2 counties. And in addition to that, we cannot forget alcohol. Especially during these COVID times, it's exacerbated, and we definitely need to have funding coming into New Mexico so that we don't have these issues of, you know, people on the streets, on drugs, you know, a lot of crimes that are committed, these people are on those drugs, and you know, dealing with children, that we protect our children. I have 4 children, and I want to make sure that New Mexico is safe. So I definitely would put our children up there at the top and do everything that I can to fight for them and fight for their future here in New Mexico.
Okay, thank you, Alexis. So with that, I appreciate your time today. Thank you so much. Do you have any final parting words?
You know, Jerry, I just want to thank you as well as the Rio Rancho Regional Chamber. I am so excited to be in this race and to promote our small business, our economy. Please vote for Alexis M. Johnson. Check out my website at alexisjohnsonnm.com, and you can catch me on Facebook at the same handle, Alexis Johnson NM. I'm really excited to be the voice here in the conservative voice of Northern New Mexico and to bring about change for the betterment of our children, our future growth, economy, and our health. Muchísimas gracias.
So right now we have State Senator District 22, Senator Benny Shindo. And then his opponent is Susan Aguayo. So we're excited to have them both here today. So we're going to go ahead and get started right away. So Senator Shindo, would you like to make some opening statements?
Thank you, Jerry. Good evening, or everybody watching. It's a pleasure to be here. When Jerry called and provided the invitation to be here, I accepted it right away, and I think it's important for voters to understand, who is going to be representing them in their district. Again, I'm Benny Shindo. I hail from Jemez Pueblo, New Mexico, which is about 30 miles northwest of here. Born and raised in Jemez, went to Colorado to pursue my higher education in the business school at University of Colorado. And spent about 20 years of work in higher education, and then came back to New Mexico after spending a few years in Colorado, and then coming to New Mexico, worked in the College of Engineering at UNM, and went to Palo Alto to work at Stanford University. And then in the late 90s, found my way back home. As anybody ever is raised in New Mexico, home is home, and we may travel around the world, but we always do come home to our famous Jemez green chili is what I call it, not Hatch. Our Jemez chili, we can compete with Hatch, and I think we will win hands down. But I've had the honor of serving in the Senate District 22 for the last 8 years, and I'm asking folks to support me again. There's a lot of challenges that we face in our district. We have the urban area of Rio Rancho, and pretty much outside of that, it's almost, probably 90% rural. We have a lot of challenges, in our district, and I feel that, I've represented the district very well, from the city of Rio Rancho all the way to, Rio Rancho County, San Juan, McKinley, Sandoval, and part of Bernalillo County. So it's been a learning experience, and I feel that I've contributed much to our district, and I hope to continue to do so with your support. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Shindo. Ms. Aguayo, opening words?
Well, thank you so much, Rio Rancho Chamber of Commerce and the Charter School for being able to provide this opportunity to be here, to be able to, everyone to get to know me. My name is Susan Aguayo. I'm originally from New York. I was born in Peru, but raised in New York, and made my home, my roots here in New Mexico, where not only did I become a grandmother and mother-in-law, and I'm so grateful for that. My background is early childhood. I am currently a CEO of a nonprofit that many of you might know called Casey's Cause. I'm a big advocate not only of mental health, but also for education, that the children's getting the fair education they need. And my reason, for wanting to be at this opportunity to run for the state senate is because I am the people. I am of you being able to want to make the changes and be able to make the difference and hear your voice and be a voice for you in legislation. I think, we need to kind of get away from just having politicians being able to speak for us, but have the people be heard in what our needs are and what changes we need to make. So again, thank you for this opportunity to be here, to be able to discuss, what I could contribute to be able to make changes that could help better our state.
Thank you, Ms. Aguayo. So the very first question comes to you. So 2020 has been a very unusual year. If elected, what priority issues do you plan to champion?
Well, first of all, forgive me, I'm going to be looking up and down. I have my notes that I wrote down. I want to make sure I answer this correctly. One of the three most important things for me is economy, education, and mental health. And I'll start with, the economy. For me, the diversity that we have here in our economy, we need to really advocate for the businesses that right now have suffered. So suffered here right now through 2020. As you said, it's a really crazy year that I think none of us will forget would be in history. For me, I feel like the governor has stated she's going to support small businesses, but I don't believe that's happened. And the reason I give that example, I have, my son who has his own business, and he closed in March. And when he was able to reopen again, he asked for a loan and he was denied. So I'm saying, if he was denied, how many other businesses are being affected? So for me, I feel that we need to plan and support the small businesses that are backbone to the Mexico economy. And as well as for education. Education is very important to me. I feel that we rank 50 in education, and we shouldn't be ranking so high in something that's so important for the future. I will give you a quick example. I have a son with, Asperger's, and we had to take him out of district to get the needs that we need, and it shouldn't have to be that way. It's funny we're here in a charter school because that's what I had to do, take my son to a charter school. And I think that we should really be on top of where the funds are going, dividing them with the needs directly for the students. And as for mental health, I think honestly, it's common sense, bail reform and more mental health and rehabilitation. We need more resources, and we need more assistance in mental health in general, but I'm a big advocate, just like my nonprofit, we need assistance on that.
Thank you, Mr. Guayo. Senator Shindo, same question.
Thank you. I think many of you have heard, in the last 6 months, the devastating effect that we've had in our tribal communities. Basic needs, running water, basic infrastructure needs that, I think in the cities we take for granted. These are the kinds of things that challenge us in our district. Certainly, providing economic opportunities is important. But if you don't have, in today's society, broadband in our communities, what are we supposed to do? I mean, the future of our economics is going to be broadband. And unless we can find a way to extend broadband to the rural parts of New Mexico, we are going to continue to lag behind. Our children are going to continue to move to other states where they have better opportunities. So one of our priorities is basically how do we extend and make a concerted effort statewide to make sure that we have broadband services throughout New Mexico so that our children right now are suffering. We have in my community and many other communities, families are trying to figure out how they're going to educate, our children. Some have very little internet access and some have none. We have hotspots, are very sporadic and so forth. So in that kind of environment, education were already behind, but with this pandemic, it's been exacerbated even more. So these are the challenges that we face here in New Mexico, and certainly I will continue to make education and broadband deployment a priority, but at the same time creating economic opportunities, for folks in the rural areas, and that's going to require a heavy investment and so forth. So those are continue to be my priorities.
Thank you, Senator Shindo. So the next question goes right back to you, sir. What ideas do you have to address the large budget deficit that's anticipated for the state of New Mexico?
I know in midsummer, things look pretty bleak, but the latest financial forecast, I'm hoping, that the revenues are up. So hopefully, we will continue to see an uptick in our revenues in the state. But certainly, I think we need to also look at, tightening our belts. I mean, I think certain agencies, we need to look at. We want to continue investment in education, as I mentioned. I think that's something that is important for all of us. For me, education was a vehicle that allowed me to do the things that I'm doing today. And I think many of our young people aspire to do that as well. So I think, we're going to have a large budget deficit, but at the same time, I think there's some things that we could be doing, as a legislature to make sure that we make sure that, we have the resources.
Okay, thank you, Senator Shindo. So coming right back, Ms. Aguayo, same question.
Well, our state has increased its budget by 20% in the last 2 years. But if we see in the last 2 years how many households has budgets have increased, I will advocate for new taxes. The left-wing controlled legislature, voted for the largest tax increase in New Mexico history of 2019, and yet here we are again. $2 billion surplus that has been spent. I believe that just like in a family, you need to budget. You need to learn how to be able to put the money in where the needs are, and that's what should be done. I think so ridiculously we need to be not spending out of control. That's where we're at right now, and it shouldn't have to be this way because we need to be able to put things back in order. And that would be my biggest advocacy to do.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Aguayo. So next question's coming right back to you. So New Mexico is seen as a very regulated state. So in association with that, give you an example, Arizona and New Mexico became states about the same time, and it's been reported by numerous publications New Mexico has twice as many regulations and laws. Is there anything the legislature could do to attract more out-of-state investment if we can decrease regulations?
I think decreasing regulations, let me try to put that the best way. I think right now our economy, as we're speaking about the regulations, we are not attracting other states to come and build businesses because we're not being a friendly, state. As far as for us raising the taxes, we have Social Security, for example. How can we bring people to want to retire here? This state is known for being retiring here, being able to make this home. As I said, we ourselves made this a retirement, but to put more taxes on being able to control how much money gets back in our pockets after the hard work, it's not really making people want to come build their businesses here, so our business is not able to grow. And I think that's important.
Thank you, Ms. Aguayo. Senator Shindo, same question, sir.
There's a lot that we can do. I remember back in 2017, we passed a bipartisan bill in the Senate. I believe it was 36 to 4, that really a tax reform bill. We have currently about almost $1 billion worth of exemptions and taxes, deductions, and we were trying to take care of some of that on a bipartisan support. Unfortunately, the governor vetoed that bill. So I think there is effort in the Senate to really look at our exemptions. That's a lot of money, that we could, be bringing in if we can, pass a bill, but it has to be the will of the governor to sign that as well. But our tax system that has been, overlaid over the years is very complicated. It's not an easy thing to fix. I know, my colleague here from Rio Rancho, Representative Harper, refers to our tax as a block of Swiss cheese. It's got so many holes in it, and every time we try to do something, it's like a polycentric, figure somebody's going to pull. And anytime we do anything with our tax structure, somebody's taxes are probably going to go raise and somebody's going to go down. So it's not an easy fix, certainly complicated, but I think we're making progress, at least in the Senate chamber, to see how we can, in a bipartisan way, come up with a tax structure that's hopefully more fair and equitable to our businesses.
Thank you, Senator Shindo. So you brought up taxes, so let's talk about taxes for a brief minute. So you had brought up Representative Harper. He's looked at comprehensive tax reform in years past. And when we look at that, what are your thoughts on comprehensive tax reform? And then how can we make it fair and consistent and equitable for New Mexico citizens? But on top of that, if you're reelected, would you raise taxes?
That's something that I think a lot of us are consistently looking at. How do we develop a comprehensive tax reform? And as I said, this is a very complicated matter, and it's not an easy task. We've created exemptions to create certain industries, and as they mature, at what point do those things sunset? We have created deductions, in ways that perhaps needs to be revisited. But all of these things requires a lot of attention to detail. And I know that we've had various proposals come out. My colleague, up in San Juan County has proposed, he walks around with a coin, 2% tax. So let's just tax everybody 2%, and nobody can argue about who's paying taxes and so forth. So you have one idea, and then you have other ideas, and somewhere the answer is somewhere in between. But it's certainly, I think we're all for, at least a fair, equitable a process so that our businesses can thrive. We can create new businesses, also bring, investment from other states. But it's going to require a lot of work in both houses, and certainly the support of the governor to make this happen. The question of raising taxes, as I said in my earlier statement, there's almost always these unintended consequences or unanticipated things that happen. And so when you're dealing with this complicated matter, somebody's taxes are going to be raised and somebody's going to be lowered. And we will hear from the lobbyists pretty quickly who those individuals are, or companies, and so forth. So we're always trying, to go through the process to make sure that we can find something that's fair and equitable.
Thank you, Senator Shindo. Ms. Aguayo.
Really good, question, because it goes back to what we previously discussed. I think it's really important to address and reform the state regarding the taxes. I believe that the majority of our economy is based on small businesses, and if we keep building taxes where we keep putting these regulations that stops them from being able to grow the businesses, we're not welcoming other businesses to come here because that's showing the burden. So I think it is important for us not to raise the taxes, and that the regulations other ways be able to stay the same to be able to help more people succeed in what they started. If not, we're not going to have our growth in this state with businesses, because that's what we're mainly about, is small businesses.
Thank you, Ms. Aguayo. So, Ms. Aguayo, next question's coming right back to you. So, in New Mexico, whether it's city, state, or county, potential contracts or requests for proposals, how can the legislature come up with some different ideas, and what are your thoughts on helping New Mexico land more of these in-state contracts? And second of all, when you purchased your signs, did you purchase them locally in Sandoval County, in New Mexico, or out of state?
Well, I worked with my budget. As I said before, budget is really important. I think we all look at it that way, it'd be good. So I actually purchased within the state and out of the state to be able to support not only within the state but locally. I think that's really important. I think that's one thing our mayor always stands and says, support your local businesses, and that's exactly what I did. I went both ways to be able to help both ways.
Okay. Senator Shindo, the same question around where'd you buy your signs? And second of all is the request for proposals allowing more New Mexico businesses to win those contracts.
Certainly, no. I have purchased my signs here in New Mexico. We've really looked at, I'm also vice chair of corporations and transportation, so in our committee, ideas have come up about maybe setting aside a certain percentage of our procurement, to in-state companies. And I think that's a good thing. We need to not only attract, other companies from out of state, but I think we also need to be able to be in a position to support, our small business, and they are the backbone of our economy. And if we can make sure that a certain percentage of our procurement goes to companies that are born, here and started here, then more power to all of us, because those funds then, have a multiplier effect, throughout the community and so forth. So I am totally for having those, maybe a certain percentage of our procurement go to in-state businesses.
Okay, thank you, Senator Shindo. Okay, so Senator Shindo, the next question I have for you is around education. So in Arizona, Texas, Utah, and Colorado, they all fund education at a lower rate than New Mexico, but yet New Mexico continually rates 49th. So is there something that the legislature could do to help improve education in New Mexico? Because obviously it's not a money issue.
You know, it's in some level it may not be a money issue, but if you recall, you know, the recent Supreme Court decision, you know, Yazzie versus Martinez, that we are not as a state investing enough in our at-risk kids. And I think if you look at the state as a totality, we do have a lot of at-risk kids. You know, maybe it's not so, you know, I know my kids went to Rio Rancho, both graduated out of Rio Rancho High School, great education, both have gone on and graduated from college and doing their own thing. But not all have those kinds of resources and so forth. So I think we need to make that continuing investment in education, particularly, you know, for our at-risk students, because those, I think, are the ones that are most vulnerable, and those also have the best potential to turn their communities, their respective communities around.
Thank you, Senator Shindo. Ms. Aguayo, same question around education?
You know, I believe, you know, our school, you know, for many reasons and many issues, why they always score, you know, rank so poorly in the numbers, and it shouldn't really have to be that way. I think, unfortunately, right now, what the governor has done is made like a blanket decision on what could work for everybody. What works for Albuquerque is not going to work for our community, and I think that we really need to really look and see what are the needs of the children in the local, you know, schools. I think the boards of the schools should really have more decision making when it comes to the capabilities of what their school needs, what decisions need to be made for each individual. I also feel like the teachers and parents, if the community gets together, you know, they will be able to understand what the children's and the school's needs are, and not what Santa Fe could decide what they need. They don't know what our kids need, but ourselves as parents and as school board members.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Aguayo. So let's stay on the same conversation around education. So in this state, we have a lack of funding for career technical education at the high school level as well as post-high school. From that standpoint, would you support expanding funding for career technical education? And then also I'd like to hear is what are your thoughts on how we can connect our youth to businesses? Ms. Aguayo, you're first.
Okay, so I believe, you know, the small businesses that we have, to jump the opportunity, they jump the opportunities to be able to give the young adults, to be given the opportunities to be able to do internship, you know, to be able to have the opportunity to blossom into what they're capable of doing. If we were to give more technical opportunities in schools before kids post-graduate, there'd be something for them to actually fall back on. As I found out as I've gotten older, not everybody's made for college. You know, I was raised that everybody goes to college, but I realized there's so much more out there that kids who go to technical schools. And so I think the opportunity of being able to offer them programs that prepares them. So when they leave school, they have some kind of vocational training to take, whether they go to college or not. It's important to know that also that after college, you know, many kids are leaving the state, and it's because we don't have much to offer them. So I do believe there's enough businesses out here that will be willing to help students have the programs they need to be able to blossom to what they need to do.
Thank you, Ms. Aguayo. Senator Shindo, same question around career technical education.
Thank you. Great question. You know, I come from a family of 8 children. You know, most of us, I think, with the exception of my younger brother, have graduated from college. And I've been an advocate for education. But as I look back, you know, on many of our young people's experience, and looking back, you know, when we were in high school, when, you know, vocational schools and things, you know, building homes, electrical trades, and welding, those were very popular. And I don't know where in the system we lost those. Because I feel, you know, having come back full circle and spent 20 years in higher education, not every child wants to pursue a 4-year education. So we have to create those tracks so that we can have the workforce that's needed. I mean, you know, my shower went out. I'm gonna have an appointment with a plumber tomorrow afternoon, and I know I'm gonna pay a lot of money. I mean, and somehow, you know, those positions, you know, carpentry, welding, you know, I look at my life, I have a small farm up in Jemez, and, you know, I went through higher ed, but I don't want to take another, you know, high-level class anymore. I want to take welding and small engines because, you know, when my equipment breaks, I'm on my own. And those are the kinds of things. And then when I visit rural schools out in my district, they really want those things because out in rural areas, you have to be very multitask. You have to be able to do the kinds of things that we can't just run down to the store and pick up a tool or call the welder or call, you know, some, you know, business to come out. You have to be a lot of things, and I think I'm very supportive of those kinds of education.
So sorry you ran out of time on that. That is probably a longer conversation than that couple minutes, right?
Exactly.
Next question is, and this is a big one for the district that you represent, is infrastructure. There's two questions associated with this. First one being is do you support the expansion of Paseo del Volcán that will create a fast way to, potentially a fast way to connect I-40 to the Four Corners? And then the second question around that is New Mexico's infrastructure, particularly throughout Sandoval County, is aging rapidly. So there's a need for new roads and bridges, et cetera, especially bridges in Sandoval County. Where do you stand on both those issues? Senator Shindo, you're first.
Oh, okay. All right. Thank you. Thank you, Jerry. No, I certainly support. I mean, I think the investment of our infrastructure across the state, it's going to be a huge investment, but it also can, you know, spur economic development. So many of our companies that need the work and so forth, and we can employ a lot of people. I remember several years back, maybe about over a decade ago, you know, I have a nephew of mine that was getting his civil engineering degree at New Mexico State, and during the summer, he was working with professors going through all the whole state and assessing our bridges. Every time he would come home at night, I get more scared of a bridge that I needed to cross the following day, because he would show me, you know, how, you know, the aging of our bridges and what that means and the condition that we're at. And so I truly understand that we need to do a better job in our infrastructure, our roads, even our railways. You know, we were talking about that in the Gallup region. You know, we have a railroad spur out there that could create a lot of jobs and so forth. So I'm certainly would support, you know, more infrastructure development. The Paseo del Volcán issue, you know, I know I've invested, I think, you know, capital outlay money, you know, for right-of-way purchases to make that hopefully happen in the very near future. So, but it's going to be a huge investment, but certainly necessary for us in the northwestern part of our area.
Thank you, Senator Shindo. Ms. Aguayo, same question.
Well, I definitely believe expanding Paseo Volcán definitely will offer more opportunities for more jobs. I know when I moved out here 16 years ago, it wasn't built yet. I had to take 25 to get into Albuquerque. And it's one or the other, you leave earlier because it's very congested, especially now if I'm 50, or you get late to where you're going. And so I think the opportunity of having Paseo Volcán expanded, not only would it give more jobs, but it also give the point of building more houses. You know, more families will have more opportunities to have that leeway of more income coming in. And obviously, if we have more income coming in, we definitely want to be able to have more money coming into our state. So having that expanded opens doors to other things as well. So I think it's a good idea, and definitely I support it.
Thank you, Mr. Aguayo. I'm going to throw in one more question here, and just based on your area that you're at, is broadband is a challenge throughout your district. What are your thoughts on how we can get the legislature's support to push broadband along? Ms. Aguayo, you're first.
I'm sorry, broadband?
With broadband, having internet access. We give you an example. We just completed the census. Census ends October 5th, and that the district that you'll be representing has struggled to complete the census because they didn't have online access. So how can you, is there something you could push through or get the legislature's support in expanding internet and broadband access?
You know, I think in our district we have definitely a higher, better opportunity of having the internet than other rural areas. But I think what I've seen done in some cases, people have gone to, you know, places nearby that have been able to have the internet. We're giving them more opportunities for some children who need to do schoolwork or need to do other jobs and have that sharing of the expanding of the internet. I think it's a good way to be able to help, you know, each other. But definitely, I think that having the schools have a wider opportunity to help other people have the internet access, those who can't. It'd be a good way to help out.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Aguayo. Senator Shindo, same question around broadband. Is there something the legislature could do to bring internet and broadband to your district?
Not just the legislature, but I know with the tribes, we're also pursuing our own to make sure that we bring broadband. A couple years ago, what we call the Middle Rio Grande, Santa Ana, San Felipe, San Domingo, and Cochiti got E-rate money through the federal government, so now they're able to have high-speed internet to the schools and libraries in the communities. The following year, we got another grant on the E-rate grant, so we connected Santa Ana, Azia, and Jemez with our community libraries in the school. So now our plan is to deploy that wireless throughout the communities, and that's kind of where at the stage that we're at. So I know in the very near future, we're not waiting for the legislature or anybody. We're pursuing our own opportunities to make sure that we have these. But beyond San Ysidro, as you go north towards 550, that's going to be a challenge because our fiber, you know, is pretty much terminates there and then heads up Highway 4 to Jemez. And so beyond that, I know there's a lot of work with Sacred Wind and other companies that are trying to deploy broadband in a broader area. So I'm hoping that in the very near future that we, you know, will have broadband in the entire Sandoval County. Well, that would be great, but we don't stop there. We want to make sure that, as I said earlier in my statement, that we have broadband deployment throughout all of New Mexico for all of our children.
Thank you, Senator Shindo. Okay, closing statements. Ms. Aguayo, you're first.
I want to point out that, you know, if we keep just doing the same thing and making changes, we're going to be in the same situation where we'll be high in crime and lowest in our education. And so what I want to bring to legislation is be able to make changes and to be able to have the opportunity to really help the community. That's what we need. Hear their voices, hear what's needed. And who more than the person who lives in the community? You know, I am part of this. I am part of not only this district, but I am, as I said earlier, you know, in everything that I do, I am a mother, a wife, and I'm a grandmother. And so I know bringing my expertise of the things that I've been involved in and advocate for, that I'd be able to make a difference to help our district.
Thank you, Ms. Aguayo. Closing statements, Senator Shindo.
Thank you again, Jerry. I just want to thank the organization that supported this forum. I think it's important, as I said earlier in my statement, for folks to know who we are and what we stand for and why we put ourselves out there for a position that we don't get paid for. You know, I think we're the only state in the union that still has a citizen legislature, and certainly our commitment to the people is out there. One of the things that I have made a trademark and hopefully is to listen to everybody. You know, it's not about partisanship. It's about making our state, making our county better, and each of us have a role to play. And I've always had an open policy in my, in my office or phone or wherever in our committees to make sure that we're hearing from everybody, because we all care about New Mexico. We all want clean air. We all want clean water. We all want to protect our environment. That's what draws us to New Mexico. Whether you came on vacation and never left or was born and raised here, and those of us that have lived here for hundreds and thousands of years, we're all family. And I think that's how I see it, and all of us have to get together to make sure that we continue to pursue the things that will make us better as a state. So I ask for your support again. Thank you.
We have our final forum here, District 44. With us today, we have Jane Powdrell-Colbert, and then we also have Gary Tripp as the opponent. So with that, I'd like to reach out to Representative Jane Powdrell-Colbert for opening statements.
Thank you, Jerry, and thank you for sponsoring it. I started out in 2003 focusing on what we have in common, and it was all in District 44. I've completed numerous projects and started new ones. I have done all that I told you I would do, and my actions have spoken louder than words. If elected, I will support the New Mexico Finance Authority extension for low-interest loans for businesses in District 44 and throughout the state. I will continue to address the business and infrastructure concerns in District 44. I also hope to author, support, or co-sponsor P3 legislation. And I am currently looking at some possible law enforcement legislative changes and requirements. District 44 is a unique environment. It consists of Corrales, Rio Rancho, and the town of Bernalillo. And as the legislator, I have to be uniquely concerned because they're uniquely different and address each of these communities individually, as well as addressing the needs of this entire district. As I said, my actions speak louder than words. And my actions over the past 18 years have spoken. I told you I would do some things that you had asked. I stuck to it. I have brought close to $65 million home in infrastructure and flood control. I did what I said I was going to do.
Thank you. Mr. Tripp, opening statements?
Hello. Thank you, Rio Rancho Chamber. Thank you, KDSK, for having this event. My name is Gary Tripp, and I am running for the New Mexico House of Representatives, District 44. I would love to represent the citizens of Bernalillo, Corrales, and Rio Rancho. A little bit about myself. I was born in San Diego, California, a Navy baby, but raised most of my childhood in Las Vegas, New Mexico, while spending a couple of years in Albuquerque. After graduating from New Mexico Highlands University, my wife and I accepted our first teaching jobs in Moriarty. And from there, we've had a luxurious and wonderful educational career, spending time in Moriarty, Rio Rancho Public School District, Zia Pueblo, and as the executive director of the New Mexico Activities Association. I am married to my wife, Jeanette, of 41 years, and we have 2 wonderful daughters, both married, and they have given us 4 beautiful grandchildren. I am a husband, I am a father, I am a Christian, and as I mentioned professionally, I am an educator for the last 38 years. It has been an honor through this profession to have been entrusted with your children, whether it be providing a safe and positive environment to watching them in the robotics club, to having tough conversations to help change the course of their future. I have always strived to do my job with intense care and great responsibility. I have recently retired to petition to become your representative. I hope to earn your trust to improve education, roads and bridges, and broadband services, a clean environment, healthcare services, and public safety. I ask for your vote because I am here to work for a better and stronger tomorrow. Throughout this forum, I will continue to ask you to contact me at gary@garytripp.com or visit my website, garytripp.com.
Thank you, Mr. Tripp. So very first question's coming right back to you. So 2020 has been a very unusual year, to say the least. If you're elected, what is a priority issue that you plan to champion?
My number one priority in the area I'm most passionate and can lend the most experience is education. I believe education, in addition to economic recovery, is New Mexico's greatest priority. It has been and will continue to be if we don't prioritize it right now with some large-scale initiatives. Education is not a task that has time. It is my grandchild's kindergarten year right now. It is my neighbor's son's junior year right now. There are implementations and positively affect our students today, and I am ready and willing to lead the charge. First, to improve education, we need to aggressively attract 1,000 highly qualified educators to New Mexico. I plan to collaborate with the PED, the Department of Tourism, the Governor's Office, and legislators to make teaching in New Mexico a lucrative career. When we attract and train and retain high-quality educators in our classroom, we are in turn investing in our children, our communities, and our economy. I plan to join legislative committees, study, and communicate across the aisle with legislators about the work that needs to be done and link improvements to education, infrastructure, the environment, and our economy. Right here in District 44, single-family developers, real estate, and investors need local legislators to promote our quality schools, our public safety, our short commutes to Albuquerque and Santa Fe, and do what we can to promote our local economy.
Thank you, Mr. Tripp. Representative Padro Colbert, same question. What do you plan to champion this coming year?
Jerry, I spoke earlier in regards to some of the issues here in District 44. District 44, as I said, is unique. In Corrales, we still have some infrastructure that we need to take care of. In the town of Bernalillo, we've got 550. And 550 is one of those projects that I started out with, and I don't know how much longer I'm going to be in the legislature, but I hope to be able to finish. As I mentioned earlier, we have P3 legislation. When we talk about infrastructure, one has to know that New Mexico does not have the funding to make our infrastructure's dreams come true. Our infrastructure throughout the state is in disrepair. We have got to find a way to pass P3 legislation so that we can come together with private companies to improve our state and especially District 44. School security. We are recognized for the security of our education facilities simply because I've worked with them ever since I've gotten into the legislature. So there are numerous areas here in District 44 that I will champion. We have to keep in mind that District 44 is a region that borders a lot of Indian land. And we have to reach across the aisle and work with our Native American communities as well as their representatives in the House and in the Senate.
Thank you. So, Representative Padro Colbert, next question's coming right back to you. So, what ideas do you have to address the large budget deficit anticipated for the state of New Mexico? And, in association with that, will you vote to raise taxes?
New Mexico is going to have to return to a flat budget. I've been down this road before. And with cutting back and sticking and staying within the budgets, we managed to have an excess that we had in working with the various industries that are already here in the state, such as the oil and gas, which are the backbone to the state of New Mexico. But even more so, we have the small business community that is also the backbone of our state. And no, I will not support any type of tax increase. I will work with or sponsor legislation to encourage manufacturers and companies to come to the state of New Mexico, as I have always done. My record speaks for itself. I've carried legislation to ask investors to invest in New Mexico, to work with our tax committees so that our tax system, which still needs a lot of work, will be friendlier to businesses and hopefully bring them to New Mexico.
Thank you. Mr. Tripp, same question.
I've heard over the last couple of days that our deficit might be anywhere from $900 million to $1.5 billion. Our state budget will absolutely have a shortfall next year. If elected, I will have to review where we can become more efficient in spending by not sacrificing funding for children's education, public safety, and improving our overall infrastructure. We can work to grow our economy by investing in environmental improvements. I will work with government leaders. At a smaller scale, I did this when I took over the NMAA as executive director. I inherited a large budget deficit, and when I left, there was over $100 million in reserves. I am confident with collaboration we can still instill small changes that have greater outcomes. The question of raising taxes is a double-edged sword to me. When George W. Bush stated, "Read my lips, no more taxes," it was seen as a wonderful statement in our country. But when he signed legislation to increase taxes, I saw it as fair, while others used it against the Republican Party. I cannot answer that question as to yes or no because I researched that our country faced a $1 trillion deficit before the pandemic, and we have a greater deficit now after the pandemic. Economists state we will not see an economic recovery for several years in New Mexico. I will be transparent, though. I will communicate with voters and citizens of District 44. You can email me at gary@garytripp.com or go to my website, garytripp.com. We will be communicating, and I will let you know, and I will show transparency of what we are working on in Santa Fe.
Okay, Mr. Tripp, so let's stick with the taxes on this. So do you believe that there is a need for a comprehensive tax reform? And what ideas do you have to make New Mexico's tax fair, consistent, and equitable for New Mexicans?
My answer is yes, we absolutely need a tax reform. We can accomplish this through bipartisan action to close the loopholes on simple tax credits to deductions for our businesses. I am looking forward to working in a bipartisan way with some of our local legislators in Sandoval County who have demonstrated quality ideas in tax reform. We need to eliminate the tax on Social Security. As we know, that really is a double tax on income for retirees. In my estimations, it will generate more spending by our retirees and attract retirees to New Mexico. It will also help and will assist our retirees in poverty. We can also focus on tax credits and incentives to attract more businesses to our state and reform our taxes so they can see New Mexico as a great option to invest in.
Thank you, Mr. Tripp. Representative Paldro-Colbert, same question.
Do I believe that we need comprehensive tax reform? I sure do. And we've been working on that for many, many years. But the one thing that we learned when New Mexico in 2003 removed the food tax, we went into a free fall because the thing that we had not thought about was the long-term impact. So what happened? The cost on everything else skyrocketed. And it kind of left the taxpayers in New Mexico in a quandary because I, as a state legislator, had to work to figure out a way as to how we were going to keep our citizens and my constituents here in District 44 solvent. So yes, we do need to have a consistent and equitable tax process for New Mexico. There has been some previous and modest changes, but we still have a system that's in disarray. Loophole tax credits. We don't even know as to what credits are used and are not. You know, some of the individuals in District 44 that we don't often think about, besides those with Social Security, is our veterans. And our veterans here in District 44, like the rest of the state, are very important. And many are on fixed income. So yes, we need to reduce it, but we can't just do that overnight. And we need to work as a team statewide in order to make that happen.
Thank you. So, Representative Paldrell-Corbett, this is coming right back to you. So, when it comes to regulations in the state of New Mexico, Arizona and New Mexico became a state at about the same time together. And it has been well documented that Arizona has half as many regulations as the state of New Mexico. That said, what are your thoughts on helping out existing businesses here as well as attracting more businesses here by reducing regulation? What are your thoughts on that?
Here in New Mexico, whether we like it or not, and I'll go back to it, is we're going to have to make some significant changes in our tax structure. We've attempted a number of times to pass right-to-work law. If you look at all of the surrounding states, what do those states have in common? It's right to work. That is, except for Colorado. Colorado has as a unionized state as well as right to work. So that tells me that the legislature can work hand in hand to make some changes. Each of the aforementioned states has P3s. They have P3 laws in place that makes the difference for business and their delivery of projects and of products, as well as the construction industry. So we can get those particular laws pushed through, but we're going to have New Mexico's going to have the will to do so. Our economic growth and development can be phenomenal statewide, but we're going to have to work as a team with the majority, and the majority work with us in order to make this happen here in the state of New Mexico over this next 60-day session. But as I've stated, and I'll state it again and again, we have to be cognizant of the impact that it's going to have on our senior citizens, our veterans, and our parents with small children, and in general, our entire communities. Because as I said, in District 44, each community is uniquely different.
Thank you. Mr. Tripp, the same question.
New Mexico is seen by some corporations as overregulated, then I would like to work with small businesses and organizations like the Rio Rancho Chamber to review what is overregulated and address the issues legislatively. We must work with our government leaders in our area to utilize development programs like the Local Economic Development Act and other tax initiatives that can make us attractive as any other state. If elected, let's sit down and collaborate with the business community and our local city leaders as well as our county leaders to understand what incentives are overregulated or hampering them the most. We are all in this together. Building our economy should be an open-end communication. Again, District 44 should highlight the exemplary status of our schools, our short commutes, our healthcare luxuries, and all the other countless blessings we have here to attract businesses. We need to always build off our positives, and we will continue to see economic growth in District 44. The attractiveness of District 44 will be highlighted gary@garytripp.com, and I hope businesses will email me at gary@garytripp.com to share the quality of what is going on with their businesses and the needs they have today.
Thank you. So, Mr. Tripp, next question's coming right back to you. So, in the state of New Mexico and the county and the cities, school districts, etc., there is a lot of requests for proposals and different opportunities for businesses to be awarded contracts in the state. A large amount of those contracts go to out-of-state companies. That being said, what is it that the legislature could do to allow more local companies to win those contracts in the state? And second, everyone has campaign signs. I'm seeing them everywhere. Where did you buy yours?
My campaign has purchased campaign signs in Bernalillo County and Sandoval County. I am proud to use local businesses like Don Mickey Incorporated in Albuquerque and Deluxe Designs consistently throughout my campaign, Deluxe Designs being here in Rio Rancho. I am compelled to ask the Chamber to join me in continuing to offer training for small businesses about the procurement process. I have worked with the General Services Department. As a state legislature, I would work with the General Service Department to request changes and encourage procurement entities in our state to establish rules to help small businesses. It is my understanding that the General Services is currently reviewing and modifying the state procurement process and moving towards an effort to hopefully award more bids to businesses in New Mexico. I will be a servant leader to small businesses and ensure they receive the information they need to stay updated with the procurement process and hopefully grow their business. Again, we are working with economic growth, and I ask the Chamber and/or NAIOP to offer many workshops in the procurement process so our local businesses can grow.
Thank you, Mr. Tripp. Representative Padro Colbert, same question.
Probably this election season, I have enjoyed providing business to the small businesses here in Sandoval County. My door knockers, my campaign staff and I, we've eaten lunch, I think just about at every restaurant here in Sandoval County, and we've had a blast. I purchased my campaign signs from Print Masters and Print Express. And to date, I've probably spent close to $11,000 in our small community, our small business community. And yeah, it's important for us to provide training. And many folks think that training is just about money. You know, one of the things that you find out when you do training, and I've traveled around the country with the Small Business Administration doing training for small businesses, is we've got to open the door so that they better understand banking processes, that they have to have policies and procedures in place, and that here in New Mexico that there's a special bonding process that we have to go through. There's no reason that these gigantic infrastructure jobs should go to companies out of state. The reason that they do is because of the bonding levels that they have that we don't have, or the companies don't have here in New Mexico. So we've got to go beyond just saying it's about your dollars invested. We've got to get to the meat and potatoes of training, business training for our small business community so that they can compete anywhere.
Thank you. So Representative Padro Colbert, this question's coming right back to you, and it's about education. So New Mexico funds education at a higher level per student than Arizona, Texas, Utah, and Colorado. Yet, New Mexico continually ranks 49th. Is there something that the legislature could do to get education turned around in New Mexico?
Here in New Mexico, more than half of our budget goes to education. And quite honestly, again, I don't think money's all the problem. I happen to think that we have some good teachers here in New Mexico. We have some great facilities here in New Mexico. And yeah, every once in a while we have these issues with supplies. But through our efforts, and my effort in working with other members of the legislature, we've brought some parity to that. I believe that parents and guardians are going to have to work hand in hand with our teachers early on so that when these children come into school, that they are prepared to learn. We've done a lot with early education, but even with that, you still need to have that parental environment and involvement so that these youngsters coming in will know how to learn, that they will know how to behave in the classroom. Also, that they will respect the teachers in the classroom. No teacher should have to spend 40, 50, 60% of their time with classroom discipline issues. And many teachers have said, if we could get more parents involved, I think we could do better here in our district. Now, we all know that Rio Rancho is the 10th rated school district in the country, and we're proud of that. Rio Rancho has done more with less. They would be a perfect example for the rest of the state to follow.
Thank you. Mr. Tripp, the same question.
New Mexico continues to rank at the bottom in comparison to those other states. The statistics are true, but that's analyzing it in a whole. We have districts like Rio Rancho, Los Alamos, Farmington, Gadsden, and countless classrooms throughout the state who are in fact fostering student success. What we need to do is build off those best practices that we have here in New Mexico, evident in their test scores, and look to implement those practices in other schools around our state. There is no apply for all in education, but an area we can address is recruiting more highly qualified teachers to our state. Right now, our districts are in a teacher shortage and have to staff classrooms in every district in the state of New Mexico with long-term substitutes. Our students deserve more highly qualified teachers. They deserve the best in America. Our funding is high in comparison, but the transparency of where that funding is landing is low. I am calling on the PED, educational leaders, and school boards to be more detailed and transparent with school budgets in their communities. I am also calling upon the PED, educational leaders, tourism, our governor, as well as legislators to close the gap on the shortage of teachers we have in New Mexico through the recruitment efforts across the whole nation. Representative Padral Colbert is right. We have currently started providing pre-K and early childhood education to all New Mexico, and we will close the gap in that area. We are doing some good things. We need to continue to foster the best practices that are going on in New Mexico.
Thank you, Mr. Tripp. So let's continue on with education. So when it comes to career technical education, these are valuable jobs and valuable opportunities. The state of New Mexico has not properly supported the funding for career technical education at the high school level or beyond. That being said, a lot of our youth are leaving the state of New Mexico to uncover those opportunities. So my question to you is do you support the expansion of funding for career technical education? And what are your thoughts on how we can connect business to our youth?
First, let me say there is no one answer why students, our greatest resource, have left the state and have not returned. But I can generalize a conclusion. Lack of a diversified economy, our educational status, the lack of healthcare accessibility in rural New Mexico, just to name a few things. To keep our students after graduation, our economy can diversify through a boom in renewable energy industry, real estate attracting tech and healthcare businesses to New Mexico, especially District 44, and the continual improvements to education. I believe we need career technical education improvements in HVAC, automotive mechanics, welding, electrical, plumbing, and construction. Since I was an educator in Rio Rancho Public Schools, I do know we have career pathways. We have career pathways in automotive, DECA, film, Educators Rising, CAD, robotics, FFA, theater tech, computer science, culinary arts, Project Lead the Way, biomedical, engineering, criminal justice, just to name a few things. But they are still in an introductory phase at many of our high schools across the state. These programs need to be at least in grades 6 through 12, not just high school. Education has a long ways to go in partnerships with local communities and universities, companies, and legislators to make this a full-blown pathway in every school district. To have a full-blown quality program in each career, we need millions and millions of dollars. We need partnerships. We need to go across the aisle, and we need to engage for the future of our state and economic growth and give our children the best quality education they deserve.
Thank you. Representative Padro Colbert, the same question.
Here in New Mexico, at one time we had all the different pathway programs in every school. And we've gone down the path that every child needs to go to college. Well, not every child needs to go to college. What New Mexico needs to do is we need to go back and start very early in elementary school in helping kids to dream about what they would like to be. How does that happen? That's going to happen because we're going to work and build our business community so that those businesses will go back and start adopting and have a community school program. You know, I support our education system. Do I criticize it at times? Yes, I do. But I think we have a good system. I just think that we've got to bring communities and schools back together so that these youngsters will know what's out there. I think a lot of kids leave the state of New Mexico also for adventure, only to find that they'll go through those different jobs, and like many of us, they'll come back to New Mexico because the best place to live and quality of life is here in New Mexico. But we've got to give them the opportunity to go after those adventures. When they leave New Mexico, they are skilled. We've taught them. We've trained them. We just need to do a better job and start doing it at an earlier age for our young people.
Thank you. So Representative Padro Colbert, this question's coming right back to you. Infrastructure in New Mexico is rapidly aging. We need new roads, bridges, highways are definitely needed. So my question is first of all, where do you stand on a potential infrastructure bill? And then also, do you support the extension of Paseo del Volcan to link the Four Corners to I-40?
I have supported Paseo del Volcan even before I became a legislator because I was working for the city of Albuquerque. And way back then, we were looking at how do we handle the west side. Paseo del Volcan, all of the right-of-way has been purchased. We've worked with legislators in the Albuquerque area. We've worked with legislators across the aisle, and our team here, we came together to fund the purchase of the full right-of-way for Paseo del Volcan. New Mexico gets $400 million from the feds, but the problem that we have is that $159 million of that comes from the feds goes to debt service. And so that leaves us right at around $300 million that we can invest in our bridges, our roads, as well as in the interstate. And when you look at that, it's costing approximately $1 million a mile. When you look at a state like ours, $300 million doesn't go very far in road maintenance, in new roads. And we're going to have to look at a piece of legislation, and we've done that. It's just getting it out of the Senate to earmark, and I know that's a dirty word sometimes, but we're going to have to earmark some other funds so that we can bring our highways and our bridges up to par. And I'll go back to something I said earlier, and that's P3s, public-private partnerships.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Tripp, the same question.
The Paseo del Volcan project was introduced in 1998 and has been slow-moving because it is no easy feat. Dr. Representative Padral Colbert just mentioned some of the reasons why. There seems to be a disconnect, though, on the urgency. And Sandoval County has suffered a lack of economic growth because of that lack of urgency. This pathway, which is what Paseo means in Spanish, will connect I-40 to Highway 550. This 47 miles of future economic growth to our area will cost $1.75 million times 47 for a current day cost of over $50 million. The priority needs to be on our city council, our mayors, on Sandoval County, our county manager, and our local legislators to go across the aisle and work with Bernalillo County, make every effort we can to create economic growth for District 44 in this whole county. New roads, improving roads, new bridges, and maintaining our highways, improving broadband purses, and reaching more citizens with these services is something I will work on with the Department of Transportation and legislative committees, constantly striving to keep District 44 in the forefront.
Thank you, Mr. Tripp. So that's all the questions that we have today. So final words and closings. Mr. Tripp, you're first.
Thank you. Thank you for doing this evening. I often wonder why I retired and announced running for office November of 2019. Been working several hours a day since that time. But then I realized that I have an obligation to where I came from. I am a New Mexican. I am a person from humble beginnings. I am a person that, along with my brothers, took turns receiving food stamps my whole childhood career. I have an obligation to put something forth to New Mexicans, to our citizens. I think we need to move fast and furious on financial literacy in our state. I'm running because I think we have a very serious problem with things that we never debate, talk about anymore. Things like pedophiles that are out there. I want to be the fighter and champion to work with CYFD and those kinds of departments to make sure our children are safe. You notice how we don't talk about school shootings just 2 or 3 weeks after they happen? You know, my friends have said, they've seen me cry after a school shooting. You know, you get pretty passionate when you take care of these kids. There's things we don't talk about. We don't talk about PTSD with veterans. We don't talk about PTSD with police officers or firefighters. We don't talk about the problems as much as we should. And I want to be a champion for the people of poverty. I want to be a champion for the people that are out of poverty working to the middle class. I want to be a champion of improving education. I want to be a champion of developing term limits in government. I don't think federal government or state government should have term limits.
Thank you,
Sorry,
Mr. Tripp.
Went over.
Representative Paldrell Colbert, your closing statements.
Well, I'd also like to thank you for sponsoring this tonight. You know, I grew up in the city of Albuquerque. I started working for the municipality, the city of Albuquerque, at the age of 16. I've worked in government as long as I can remember. And I'll pat myself on the back for having had the opportunity to make a difference in young people's lives. No, I wasn't a school teacher. I never sought to be a school teacher. I ran community centers. I made sure that many, many low-income kids had something new that they could wear for opening day at school, that they had the necessary supplies that they needed for opening day at schools. I worked for the Albuquerque Police Department. I worked child abuse. I know what it is to work domestic violence. I know what it is to have a family to lose a loved one. The flip side of that, I know what it takes, and I have done that to improve the quality of life. I'm state representative of District 44 simply because of one reason. The constituents in District 44 know that they can trust me. They know that I work hard. They know that I deliver. They know that they can call me at any time. And believe me, I've had anytime calls. I've worked with families, not just middle-income families here in District 44. I've worked with some very low-income families here in District 44. I'm a veteran's wife. I know what that struggle is. And I have worked with families here in District 44 for one reason, and I've been elected because I am one of them. Thank you.